Hey there. Welcome to Nocturne Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So before you get cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. The last house on Briar Hollow Road had been abandoned for 15 years. Yet every winter, its chimney produced smoke. Locals claimed it was just wind stirring soot loose from the flue. Others said teenagers snuck inside to scare each other. But when a snowplow driver reported seeing a woman standing in the upstairs window, watching him pass at exactly 3:17 a.m., the town stopped laughing. 3 weeks later, a missing persons report surfaced. The description of the missing woman matched the figure seen in the window, and she had vanished 10 years after the house was supposedly abandoned. The first thing Detective Aaron Pike noticed about Briar Hollow Road was how quiet it felt. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. Snow blanketed the long, winding stretch of road like a burial shroud, muffling the world into eerie stillness. Pike's tires crunched slowly over packed ice as his unmarked sedan crawled toward the end of the road, where the tree line thickened into a dark wall of skeletal branches. And beyond them sat the house. He had seen photographs before arriving. Crime scene archives, old real estate listings, newspaper clippings yellowed with time. None of them prepared him for seeing it in person. The two-story Victorian structure stood crooked against the gray sky, its faded blue paint peeled into jagged strips that fluttered like torn skin. The wraparound porch sagged unevenly. Its railing snapped in several places, as if something heavy had slammed into it years ago. Snow clung to the roof in thick layers, except for one peculiar detail. The chimney was clear. No snow rested around it. The bricks were darkened, recently warmed. Pike parked 30 feet away and shut off the engine. Silence swallowed him instantly. He reached for the file sitting on his passenger seat and flipped it open. Case file, missing person Lena Calloway. Age 34. Occupation, travel photographer. Last seen, December 12th, leaving her apartment in Riverton City. Vehicle found, abandoned near Briar Hollow Road turnout. Inside the file was a photograph of Lena. Bright green eyes, auburn hair tied loosely behind her shoulders. A confident smile that suggested she was used to exploring unfamiliar places alone. The last photo taken of her, according to timestamps recovered from her cloud storage, was snapped 3 nights ago. And it showed this house. Pike exhaled slowly, his breath fogging against the windshield. "Let's see what you're hiding," he muttered. The call that started it all. The case had landed on Pike's desk because no one else wanted it. Technically, Briar Hollow fell under county jurisdiction, but every officer who'd worked cases involving the road had requested reassignment within months. Officially, the reason cited was burnout. Unofficially, it was fear. Sheriff Dalton, a thick-necked man with tired eyes, had handed Pike the file personally 2 days earlier. "You ever worked cold rural disappearances?" Dalton asked. "2," Pike replied. Dalton nodded slowly. "Then you know how they go." "Yes," Pike said. "Usually someone knows something and doesn't talk." Dalton hesitated. "Not this time," he said quietly. The legend of Briar Hollow. According to town history, Briar Hollow Road once connected 2 logging settlements. When the timber industry collapsed in the late 1970s, both communities died almost overnight. Families moved. Businesses shuttered. The forest reclaimed everything, except one property, the Briar Hollow Estate. Originally owned by the Whitlock family, the house had served as both residence and boarding home for traveling loggers. In 1989, a fire partially damaged the west wing. The Whitlocks repaired the exterior, but never reoccupied the home fully. Then, in 1991, the entire Whitlock family disappeared. No signs of struggle. No bodies. Just an untouched dinner table and a radio still playing softly in the living room. Authorities searched the surrounding forest for weeks, but the case went cold. Over time, the house became a local ghost story, a place teenagers dared each other to visit, but never stayed long enough to explore. Because, according to rumors, the house didn't like visitors. Entering the property, Pike stepped out of the car, his boots crunching through knee-deep snow. The cold bit through his coat instantly, sharpening his focus. He moved cautiously toward the front gate. It hung partially open, swaying slightly despite the absence of wind. Russ screamed softly as he pushed it wider. Snow along the pathway looked undisturbed, except for a narrow trail leading directly to the porch. Footprints. Recent ones. He crouched, brushing snow away carefully. The impressions were partially filled by fresh snowfall, but he could still make out details. Small boots. Possibly female. Size 7 or 8. The pattern matched Lena Calloway's hiking footwear listed in her missing persons report. Pike followed the tracks. They led directly to the front door. And stopped. He stared at the threshold, his pulse slowing as unease crept along his spine. There were no footprints leading away. Inside the house, the front door creaked open with surprising ease. Dust and decay should have flooded outward. Instead, Pike caught a faint scent of burnt cedar and something else. Warmth. The interior hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by weak daylight filtering through cracked windows. Furniture remained draped in white sheets, their surfaces layered in years of dust. But the floor near the entrance was clean. Recently walked across, Pike stepped inside, hand resting on his holstered weapon. The wooden floor groaned beneath him, the sound echoing unnaturally loud through the empty house. "Sheriff's Department," he called out. His voice bounced back in warped fragments. No response. He moved room by room. The living room contained antique furniture arranged neatly around an old stone fireplace. Ash filled the hearth, and unlike the rest of the house, it was fresh. He crouched beside it. The embers were dead now, but the charcoal edges remained dark and brittle, not gray with age. Someone had lit a fire here within the last 12 hours. Pike stood slowly, scanning the room again. That was when he noticed the camera. It sat on a small side table beside the couch. Modern. Compact. Still powered on. He approached cautiously. The display screen flickered to life as he lifted it. A video file was open, paused at the last frame. He pressed play. Lena's recording. Static crackled before Lena's face filled the screen. Her expression was strained, eyes darting off camera repeatedly as she whispered, "If anyone finds this, I didn't come here alone." Pike felt his chest tighten. Behind her, the living room fireplace glowed with orange flame, confirming the recording was recent. "I followed the trail," she continued. "The disappearances weren't random. They were mapping something. Every victim, every location, it forms a pattern leading here." A loud creak echoed behind her in the recording. Lena turned sharply. "You don't understand," she whispered urgently. "The house isn't empty. Someone lives here." "Someone who?" The screen jerked violently. Lena gasped, and then the video cut to black. The second set of footprints. Pike replayed the video twice before lowering the camera slowly. He turned toward the staircase rising along the hallway wall. Something tugged at his instincts, something primal that told him he wasn't alone. He moved toward the stairs, his breathing controlled, steps careful. Halfway up, he stopped. There, layered faintly over Lena's boot prints in the dust, was another set of tracks. Barefoot. Large, and leading upward. The upstairs corridor. The second floor smelled different. Less like decay, more like confinement. Doors lined both sides of a narrow corridor. Most were slightly ajar, revealing empty bedrooms filled with broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. Except the last door at the end of the hall. It was closed. Light flickered beneath it. Pike approached slowly, every nerve screaming caution. He pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. Then, a faint scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across hardwood. He drew his weapon and pushed the door open. The room of photographs. The sight inside made him freeze. The walls were completely covered in photographs. Dozens. Hundreds. Every image showed people standing in different locations across the surrounding counties. Gas stations. Hiking trails. Motel parking lots. Grocery stores. Every person had one thing in common. They were all missing persons from the last 25 years. Red string connected the photographs in complex patterns across the walls, forming a massive spiral that converged at the center. And pinned at the spiral's heart was Lena Calloway's photograph. Beneath it sat a wooden chair. Rope dangled loosely from its arms, still swaying slightly, as if someone had been tied there recently. The voice behind him. Pike's heartbeat thundered as he stepped closer to the chair, examining the rope fibers. They were freshly frayed. Cut. Suddenly, the floorboard behind him creaked. He spun around, weapon raised. The doorway stood empty, but a voice drifted down the hallway, low and calm. You weren't supposed to find her recording. Pike stepped into the corridor, adrenaline surging. Sheriff's Department, he shouted. Show yourself. Soft footsteps echoed above him. There was another level. An attic. The footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, as if guiding him upward. Pike stared toward the narrow ladder leading to the attic hatch. Snow began falling harder outside, wind howling through cracks in the house. The structure groaned like something alive and restless. He reached for the attic ladder, every instinct warning him to stop. Instead, he pulled it down and climbed. The attic discovery. The attic was warmer than the rest of the house. That was the first thing Pike noticed. The second was the mattress in the center of the room, surrounded by lanterns and stacks of journals. The third was the blood stain soaking into the wooden floor beside the mattress. Fresh. He rushed forward, scanning the room for signs of life. That was when he saw the message carved into the floorboards. 5 words. You found the first house. Pike's stomach dropped. First. Not only. Behind him, the attic hatch slammed shut violently. Darkness swallowed the room as the lantern flames flickered out simultaneously. And from somewhere in the blackness, the same calm voice whispered, You're closer than any of them. The darkness inside the attic pressed against Detective Aaron Pike like a physical force. He stood frozen, his senses straining through the pitch-black silence. The smell of extinguished lantern oil drifted through the air, sharp and metallic, blending with the copper tang of fresh blood soaking into the floorboards beside him. You're closer than any of them. The voice echoed faintly in his mind, calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly controlled. Pike forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic was what whoever, or whatever, lurked inside this house wanted. He drew his flashlight from his belt and clicked it on. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing dust particles swirling like disturbed snow. The attic was empty. The mattress still lay in the center. The journals remained stacked beside it. The blood stain glistened darkly under the light. But there was no sign of the person who had spoken. Pike moved cautiously, scanning every corner of the triangular attic space. The walls were lined with insulation that had been partially torn away, revealing aged wooden beams scratched with shallow marks. Some looked accidental, others intentional. He reached the hatch and tried lifting it. It didn't budge, locked from the outside. He exhaled sharply, forcing his mind into problem-solving mode. He had faced dangerous situations before, armed suspects, hostage standoffs, violent fugitives, but this felt different. This felt planned, psychological. Whoever controlled this house didn't rely on force alone. They relied on fear. The journals. Pike turned his attention to the stack of journals beside the mattress. There were at least 12 of them, each bound in worn leather, their edges curled with age. Some looked decades old. Others appeared relatively new. He flipped open the top journal. Inside, the handwriting was precise and methodical. Not chaotic, not erratic, organized. The first page contained a list of names, dozens of them. Beside each name was a date and a location. Pike's pulse quickened as recognition struck him. Many of the names matched missing persons cases he had studied during his career. Some were regional. Others were from completely different states. He turned another page. A map was taped across 2 spreadsheets of paper. Small red circles marked locations across the country, densely clustered in rural areas, national parks, and abandoned towns. Lines connected the circles in a massive, spiraling formation. The spiral narrowed toward the center. And at the center, Briar Hollow Road. Pike stared at the map, his mind racing. This wasn't random. It wasn't even local. It was systematic. A network. He flipped through more pages. Each victim entry contained disturbing details, daily routines, personal habits, family connections, psychological profiles. Whoever created these journals had studied their targets for months, sometimes years, before they disappeared. He stopped on Lena Calloway's entry. It included photographs of her taken secretly at airports, cafes, hiking trails. The final note beneath her profile was written only days ago. Subject displays investigative curiosity. Increased risk of premature discovery. Extraction accelerated. Pike clenched his jaw. Extraction, he muttered. Not abduction. Not murder. Extraction. The word implied purpose. Control. Escape from the attic. A faint metallic click echoed behind him. Pike spun toward the hatch just as it creaked open slightly, letting a thin sliver of hallway light spill into the attic. No one stood there. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing the journals and stuffing two into his evidence bag, he rushed to the ladder and climbed down, weapon drawn. The upstairs hallway was empty. The closed bedroom door at the end of the corridor, the room filled with missing persons' photographs, now stood wide open. Pike moved toward it slowly, scanning the hallway. Every floorboard groan made his nerves tighten further. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. The spiral pattern of photographs on the wall had changed. Lena's picture was gone. In its place, pinned at the spiral's center, was a photograph of him. The message. Pike stared at the image, his throat tightening. The photo had been taken recently, likely within the last 24 hours. It showed him exiting the sheriff's office, unaware he was being watched. Below the photograph, written in neat block letters, was a single sentence. "You are now part of the map." A chill spread through Pike's chest as he scanned the surrounding photos again. Some victims were circled in black marker. Others were crossed out entirely. He reached toward his radio. Static crackled immediately, drowning out any attempt to contact dispatch. "Of course," he muttered. The house wasn't just a crime scene. It was a controlled environment. The hidden basement. Pike forced himself to continue searching. Fear meant mistakes, and mistakes meant becoming another photograph on the wall. Back downstairs, he conducted a faster but thorough sweep. The kitchen remained untouched, though he noticed canned food stacked neatly inside the pantry, expiration dates within the last year. Someone had been restocking supplies regularly. The dining room held another disturbing detail. Place settings for 3 people sat arranged on the table, dustless and recently polished. He crouched beside them, examining the utensils. 3 forks, 3 knives, 3 plates, but only one chair showed signs of recent use. The others remained perfectly aligned, untouched, waiting. Pike stood slowly, scanning the floor. That was when he noticed faint drag marks leading toward the far corner of the room. He followed them to a large antique cabinet pressed against the wall. Its weight suggested it hadn't been moved in years, yet the floor beneath it showed fresh scratch marks. He holstered his weapon, braced himself, and shoved the cabinet sideways with a grunt of effort. Behind it was a narrow basement door, unlocked. He hesitated only a second before pulling it open. The underground chamber. The basement stairs descended steeply into darkness. The air rising from below smelled damp and stale, layered with the unmistakable scent of confinement. Pike activated his flashlight again and descended carefully, each step echoing through the narrow stairwell. At the bottom, the beam revealed a wide underground chamber reinforced with concrete walls, clearly renovated long after the house's original construction. Metal rings were bolted into the floor. Chains hung loosely from them. A folding table sat in the center of the room, covered with medical equipment, recording devices, and labeled storage containers filled with syringes and sedatives. Pike approached cautiously, scanning labels. Ketamine, midazolam, morphine, professional-grade sedation drugs. This wasn't improvised. It was clinical, organized. He opened one of the storage containers and found dozens of memory cards labeled with dates and victim names. Evidence. Documentation. Someone wasn't just abducting people. They were recording it. The wall of routes. Across the far wall of the chamber hung a massive laminated map of the United States. Colored pins connected with string formed complex travel routes across state lines. Each route ended at one of several marked houses, properties scattered across remote locations nationwide. Pike's heart pounded as realization struck. Briar Hollow wasn't the origin. It was one node in a much larger operation. He counted at least 8 other marked houses, 8 potential abduction sites, 8 potential holding locations. The scale of it made his stomach twist. "How many victims?" he whispered. A sudden thud echoed upstairs. Pike froze. Footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, moving across the living room floor above him. He extinguished his flashlight instantly, plunging himself into darkness. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. Then, a faint scraping sound drifted down through the ceiling, as if furniture was being moved again. Blocking exits. The second message. Pike waited several tense minutes before cautiously reactivating his flashlight and scanning the chamber again. That was when he noticed something new. A clipboard resting on the folding table. He was certain it hadn't been there earlier. He approached slowly. The paper clipped to it contained fresh handwriting. Detective Pike, subject observation begun. Behavioral response, controlled but escalating. Prediction, will pursue network independently. Outcome probability, 72% success in reaching second house. Pike's hands tightened around the clipboard. Whoever was orchestrating this operation wasn't just watching him. They were studying him, testing him. The recorded voice. A small speaker mounted in the corner crackled to life suddenly, making Pike spin toward it. The same calm voice filled the chamber. "You're faster than the others," it said conversationally. Pike stepped closer to the speaker. "Where is Lena Calloway?" A soft chuckle echoed through the room. "Alive," the voice replied. Pike's chest tightened. "For now." "Why?" Pike demanded. "Why are you doing this?" There was a long pause before the voice answered. "To perfect selection." The words sent a chill through him. "People vanish every day, detective," the voice continued. "But most are wasted potential. Poor candidates. We choose differently. We choose those who search, those who question, those who refuse comfort." Pike's jaw clenched. "You're building something." "Correct. Where are they being taken?" Another pause. Then, "Find the second house." The speaker went silent. The realization. Pike stared at the massive map again, his mind racing through the possibilities. If Lena was alive, and if the voice was telling the truth, then time mattered. He scanned the 8 marked houses carefully. One stood out immediately. It was circled in black ink, located deep within a remote mountain region 3 states away. Beside it, handwritten text read, "Next convergence point." Pike snapped photographs of the map and gathered as much physical evidence as he could carry. Every instinct told him to leave immediately and contact federal authorities. But the voice's words echoed in his mind. "You're closer than any of them." Who were the others? Other detectives? Other investigators? Had they all vanished chasing the same trail? The burning evidence. As Pike reached the basement stairs, smoke drifted faintly from above. His pulse spiked. He rushed upstairs, weapon drawn. The living room fireplace roared with sudden flame, far stronger than before. The room filled with smoke as stacks of photographs burned rapidly inside the hearth. Evidence. Destroyed. Pike lunged forward, grabbing several partially burned photographs and stuffing them into his coat. Above the fireplace mantel, carved into the wood, was a final message. "The map is never complete." The house groaned as wind howled through its cracked windows. Flames crackled louder, devouring decades of collected victim data within seconds. Pike turned and sprinted toward the front door. He burst outside into the blinding snowstorm, just as part of the roof collapsed inward with a thunderous crash. He stumbled through the snow toward his car, clutching the salvaged evidence and journals. Behind him, Briar Hollow House burned slowly, deliberately, like it had served its purpose. The new destination. Inside his car, Pike slammed the door and started the engine, his hands shaking slightly as he spread the rescued map photographs across the dashboard. 8 houses. 8 possible hells. One circled in black. He stared at the coordinates, then at Lena's photograph clipped inside the journal. "Hold on," he whispered. He shifted the car into drive, tires spinning briefly before gripping the snow-covered road. As he accelerated away from Briar Hollow, he didn't notice the distant figure standing among the trees, watching his headlights disappear. Nor did he hear the quiet whisper carried by the storm. Phase 2 begins. The storm followed Detective Aaron Pike for nearly 3 hours. Snow battered his windshield relentlessly as he drove through the winding mountain highways that cut across state lines. The GPS signal flickered repeatedly, struggling against the thick cloud cover and remote terrain. Eventually, it died entirely, leaving Pike relying on printed satellite maps and fading road signs half buried beneath ice. The circled coordinates from Briar Hollow pulsed in his mind like a countdown timer. Second house. He hadn't contacted federal authorities yet. Part of him knew he should have. The case was far too large for one detective to handle alone. But the journals, the map, the voice, everything suggested this network thrived on time and secrecy. If he alerted the wrong channels, whoever orchestrated it might erase every trace before help arrived. And Lena Calloway was still alive. He gripped the steering wheel tighter as his tires slid briefly across black ice before regaining traction. "Stay alive," he muttered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Lena or himself. The town of Crestfall. By sunrise, Pike reached the small mountain town of Crestfall. It barely qualified as a town, more like a scattering of aging buildings nestled between towering pine-covered slopes. A faded welcome sign leaned sideways near the road entrance, its lettering nearly worn away by decades of wind and snow. Crestfall's population sign read, "Population, 412. The number felt smaller when Pike drove through the silent main street. Most storefronts were closed, their windows frosted over. A gas station sat on the corner, its pumps creaking softly in the wind. A diner across the street glowed faintly, smoke drifting lazily from its chimney. He parked outside and stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling faintly. Warm air and the smell of burnt coffee wrapped around him instantly. A handful of locals sat scattered across booths, their conversations quieting as they noticed the unfamiliar face. A middle-aged waitress with tired eyes approached him. "You lost?" she asked. "Looking for directions," Pike replied calmly, flashing his badge quickly but discreetly. Her expression shifted instantly, from curiosity to unease. "What address?" she asked quietly. Pike slid the printed coordinates across the counter. The waitress stared at them for several seconds. Then she whispered, "You don't want to go there. The Hollow Creek property." According to the waitress, the property Pike was searching for was known locally as the Hollow Creek Estate. It sat nearly 15 miles outside town, hidden deep within private logging land long since abandoned. "Place hasn't had legal owners since the early 2000s, she explained. "Every few years someone buys it through shell companies, then disappears." Pike leaned forward slightly. "Disappear how? Stop asking about it. Stop visiting town. Stop existing." Her voice carried the quiet certainty of someone who had witnessed too many unanswered questions. "Anyone live there now?" Pike asked. She hesitated. "Lights turn on sometimes," she admitted. "Delivery trucks show up once every few months. No drivers ever come back through town after that." Pike felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Anyone report it?" She gave him a hollow laugh. "Last sheriff who tried died in a hunting accident," she said. "At least that's what the report said." The drive to Hollow Creek. The road leading toward Hollow Creek barely qualified as drivable. Snow covered most of it, forcing Pike to shift into four-wheel drive as he followed the winding trail deeper into the mountains. The forest thickened gradually, trees pressing closer to the narrow path as if trying to reclaim it entirely. The sky darkened beneath the dense canopy, even though it was still mid-morning. Finally, the road ended. A rusted gate blocked the entrance to a long, sloping driveway. A faded sign hung from the metal bars. "Private property, no trespassing." The lock had been cut recently. Pike stepped out, snow crunching loudly beneath his boots. The air here felt heavier, colder, almost suffocating. He pushed the gate open slowly and drove forward. The second house appears. The Hollow Creek estate was larger than Briar Hollow. Far larger. The mansion stretched across a hillside overlooking a frozen lake, its architecture blending Victorian elegance with industrial expansion. Several sections had clearly been added over decades, newer wings attached to older structures like tumors growing from bone. Unlike Briar Hollow, this house showed visible signs of maintenance. Snow had been shoveled from the front steps. The windows were intact. Curtains hung neatly behind the glass, and faint smoke drifted from two chimneys. Pike parked behind a row of dead hedges and shut off his engine. Silence swallowed him again, broken only by the distant crack of frozen branches shifting in the wind. He studied the property through binoculars. No visible movement, but the curtains on the second floor shifted slightly, like someone had just stepped away from the window. The surveillance system. The moment Pike approached the porch, he noticed them. Tiny black lenses embedded discreetly along the roofline. Cameras. Professional-grade surveillance, likely motion-tracked. He cursed under his breath. They already knew he was here. He drew his weapon and kicked the front door open. Inside Hollow Creek, the interior stunned him. Unlike Briar Hollow's decaying ghostliness, Hollow Creek felt alive, controlled, operational. Electric lights glowed warmly throughout the foyer. Polished hardwood floors reflected chandelier light overhead. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic cleaner. Footsteps echoed faintly somewhere deeper inside the house. Pike moved carefully, sweeping room by room. The dining hall contained long banquet tables set with pristine silverware and porcelain plates. The kitchen beyond it resembled a professional catering facility, stocked with fresh groceries and industrial appliances. This wasn't just a holding location. It was preparation, training, or something worse. The locked wing. At the far end of the main corridor, Pike found a reinforced steel door requiring keypad access. Scratches covered its surface, suggesting forced attempts from inside rather than out. He scanned the nearby walls until he found a maintenance panel partially ajar. Inside, exposed wiring allowed him to bypass the keypad with careful precision. The lock clicked open. Pike pulled the door slowly and stepped into the most horrifying room he had seen in his career. The observation hall. Rows of glass-walled chambers stretched across the massive room, each containing a small furnished living space, beds, desks, bookshelves, and surveillance cameras mounted in every corner. Inside several chambers, people moved. Alive. Pike's breath caught as he rushed forward, scanning faces through the glass. Men, women, different ages, different ethnicities, all dressed in identical gray clothing. Most stared blankly ahead, as if drugged or psychologically broken. Others sat reading or writing calmly, showing no reaction to Pike's presence at all. A woman near the far end suddenly ran toward the glass, slamming her hands against it frantically. "Help US!" she screamed, her voice muffled through the soundproof barrier. Pike rushed toward her chamber. "Where is Lena Calloway?" he shouted. The woman shook her head wildly. "They move us. They test us. They." Her voice cut off abruptly as white gas began filling her chamber from ceiling vents. "No!" Pike shouted, pounding against the glass helplessly as she collapsed unconscious within seconds. Gas began releasing in other chambers too. Within moments, every captive inside the hall dropped to the floor in silent, synchronized collapse. Pike staggered back, horrified. They had fail-safes. Remote sedation. Total control. The intercom returns. A familiar crackle filled the observation hall as hidden speakers activated. "You're exceeding expectations, Detective Pike," the calm voice said. Pike spun toward the ceiling cameras. "Where are they taking them?" "Progressing them," the voice corrected. "They're prisoners. They are candidates." "For what?" Pike demanded. The voice paused thoughtfully. "For evolution." Pike's stomach twisted. "You're sick," he muttered. "No," the voice replied evenly. "I am patient." The reveal. Suddenly, one of the chamber doors slid open behind Pike with a mechanical hiss. He turned, weapon raised. A man stepped out slowly, hands raised in surrender. He wore the same gray clothing as the captives, but his eyes were clear, alert, calculating. "I'm not one of them," the man said urgently. "Then who are you?" Pike demanded. "My name is Dr. Elias Rowe," he said, "and I helped design this place." Pike's grip tightened on his weapon. "Start talking." Rowe swallowed hard. "There isn't just one mastermind," he whispered. "There's a council, a network of psychologists, neurologists, and behavioral scientists. They believe society is collapsing under weak leadership and emotional instability." Pike stared at him. "They're abducting people they believe show exceptional resistance to fear, isolation, and psychological pressure," Rowe continued. "They're building a controlled population, leaders for what they call the next civilization." Pike felt the room tilt slightly beneath him. "Where is Lena?" he asked again. Rowe hesitated. "She passed phase 1, he said quietly. "That means she's being transferred to the primary facility." Pike's pulse thundered. "Where?" Rowe shook his head slowly. "I don't know the exact location," he admitted, "but I know who runs it." "Who?" Rowe looked toward the ceiling cameras, then whispered. "They call him the architect." The ambush. Before Pike could respond, alarms blared suddenly throughout the mansion. Red emergency lights flooded the hall, painting the unconscious captives in blood-colored glow. Rowe's eyes widened. "They know I'm talking to you," he said. Heavy mechanical locks slammed across the observation chamber doors. Steel shutters began descending over the windows. Pike grabbed Rowe's arm. "Is there another exit?" "Yes," Rowe said, pulling free and sprinting toward a maintenance corridor hidden behind one of the glass chambers. They ran through narrow service tunnels as alarms echoed around them. Footsteps thundered somewhere behind them, multiple pursuers closing in fast. "Why help me?" Pike shouted as they ran. Ro's face twisted with guilt. "Because I helped create this nightmare," he said, "and I can't watch it grow anymore." The escape. The service tunnel led to a hidden garage carved into the hillside beneath the mansion. Several black transport vans sat parked inside, their engines already warming. Ro tossed Pike a key fob. "Take one," he said. "It's GPS linked to the primary facility route." Gunshots echoed down the tunnel behind them. Pike didn't hesitate. He jumped into the nearest van as Ro climbed into the passenger seat. The garage door burst open as they sped out into the snow-covered wilderness. Behind them, the Hollow Creek mansion sealed itself shut again, like a living organism protecting its secrets. The new truth. As Pike drove down the mountain road, Ro pulled a hidden tablet from the van's dashboard. A blinking route appeared across multiple states, leading toward a single isolated location. Ro's voice shook as he stared at it. "This is where they take Phase 1 survivors," he whispered. Pike glanced at the coordinates briefly. "Is Lena there?" he asked. Ro nodded slowly. "If she survived, she's at the primary facility." Pike pressed the accelerator harder as the storm thickened around them. "Then that's where we're going." Behind them, unseen drones rose silently from the Hollow Creek estate, tracking their escape through the blizzard. The transport van cut through the blizzard like a wounded animal fighting against the storm. Detective Aaron Pike gripped the steering wheel as snow battered the windshield, reducing visibility to a ghostly blur. The GPS route on the dashboard flickered faintly, its blinking red path leading them toward the unknown. Beside him, Dr. Elias Rowe sat rigid, clutching the tablet that displayed the route to what he had called the primary facility. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the engines straining against icy roads and the distant howl of mountain wind. Finally, Pike broke the silence. "You said there's a council," he said. "How many?" Ro hesitated. 7, he answered quietly. Pike glanced at him. "And the architect leads them?" Ro nodded slowly. "Yes. He built the system, designed the selection process, created the facilities. The rest of us, we expanded it." Pike's jaw tightened. "How long has this been happening?" Ro stared out the windshield, as if dreading his own answer. "Longer than you'd believe." The origin. Ro swiped across the tablet screen, opening a series of encrypted documents. After a brief authentication process, photographs and historical records filled the display. "The program started in 1987, Ro said. Pike's eyes flickered with surprise. "That long?" Ro nodded. "It began as an experimental behavioral research project funded through multiple shell organizations tied to private defense contractors and academic grants. The goal was simple at first: to study human survival psychology." "Yes," Ro said, "but it evolved quickly." He pulled up an old photograph showing a group of researchers standing in front of a rural compound. The architect, his real name was never used within the council, was a prodigy in cognitive behavioral mapping. He believed modern society created dependency, emotional fragility, herd mentality. Pike snorted quietly. "So he started kidnapping people?" "Not at first," Ro said. "Initially, subjects volunteered. Psychological endurance trials, isolation studies, controlled stress environments." Pike stared at him coldly. "And when volunteers stopped surviving the tests?" Ro swallowed. "That's when recruitment became involuntary." The spiral philosophy. The van's tires slid briefly across an icy bend before Pike regained control. He listened carefully as Ro continued. "The architect believed human progress followed a spiral," Ro said. "Not linear. Each societal collapse created stronger survivors who rebuilt civilization. He believed another collapse was coming: global instability, environmental disaster, political fragmentation. And he wanted to build a replacement population," Pike said grimly. "Yes," Ro admitted, "by abducting people he thought were mentally strong enough to survive his tests." Ro nodded. "The spiral symbol you saw at Briar Hollow represents progression," he explained. "Each ring marks a stage of psychological endurance. Subjects who pass one phase move closer to what he calls convergence." Pike tightened his grip on the wheel. And convergence means what? Ro hesitated. A fully conditioned population, he said quietly. Individuals stripped of fear responses, trained to obey structural logic instead of emotional instinct. Pike shook his head slowly. He's not building survivors, Pike said. He's building soldiers. Ro didn't respond. The houses. The GPS route flickered as they descended from the mountains and merged onto a frozen interstate highway. Snowplows had partially cleared the lanes, allowing Pike to increase speed. The houses are testing facilities, Ro explained. Each serves a specific purpose in the selection process. Briar Hollow? Pike asked. Initial extraction and psychological destabilization, Ro said. Subjects are isolated, monitored, and forced to confront fear of abandonment. Hollow Creek? Phase 1 conditioning, Ro replied. Observation, emotional suppression, behavioral testing. And the primary facility? Ro stared at the blinking destination marker. That's where final transformation happens. Lena's status. Pike's chest tightened. If Lena passed phase 1, he said, what happens next? Ro exhaled slowly. She would undergo memory reprogramming, identity stripping, intensive cognitive restructuring. You mean brainwashing, Pike said flatly. Ro nodded reluctantly. Yes. Can it be reversed? Ro hesitated long enough to answer the question before speaking. Sometimes, he admitted, if the subject hasn't completed final convergence. Pike pressed the accelerator harder. The architect's profile. Tell me about him, Pike said. The architect. Ro's face tightened slightly. No one outside the council has ever seen his face, he said. All communication occurs through encrypted channels and voice modulation. Even council meetings are conducted remotely. You're telling me you worked for someone you never met? Pike asked. Ro nodded. He believed anonymity preserved objectivity, Ro said. He claimed emotional recognition compromised rational authority. Pike scoffed. Or he was hiding. Ro didn't argue. He's older, Ro added quietly. Records suggest he began his research in the early 1980s. That would place him in his late 60s or early 70s now. And still running this network. Yes. The selection algorithm. Ro opened another file on the tablet, displaying lines of complex data charts. The architect built an algorithm to identify candidates, Ro explained. It scans social media behavior, travel patterns, psychological indicators, academic records, even consumer choices. Pike frowned. You're profiling millions of people. Yes, Ro said, and choosing targets based on resilience indicators. Curiosity, independence, trauma survival, leadership traits, Ro confirmed. Pike's stomach turned. You're not selecting victims randomly, he said. You're harvesting potential leaders from society. Ro nodded silently. The other investigators. Pike remembered the message in Briar Hollow's attic. You're closer than any of them. How many investigators have chased this network? Pike asked. Ro hesitated. 17 that I know of, he said quietly. And? None survived past phase 2. A heavy silence filled the van. The unexpected data. Ro suddenly leaned forward, scanning the tablet rapidly. That's strange, he muttered. What? Pike asked. The route is updating, Ro said. The primary facility is relocating. Pike frowned. Relocating? It shouldn't be possible, Ro said. The primary facility is massive. Underground. Designed to be permanent. The blinking GPS marker shifted several hundred miles eastward. They're moving subjects, Ro whispered. Because they know I'm coming, Pike said. Ro looked at him. Yes. The warning broadcast. The van's dashboard screen suddenly flickered to life, interrupting the GPS display. Static filled the speakers before the calm, familiar voice echoed through the cabin. Detective Pike, the architect said smoothly. Your persistence continues to exceed projections. Pike gritted his teeth. Release Lena. You misunderstand your position, the voice replied calmly. You are not negotiating. You are participating. Ro's hands trembled slightly beside him. You've already proven exceptional resilience, the architect continued. You adapt quickly. You resist panic. You pursue logic over fear. I'm coming to shut you down, Pike said coldly. A soft chuckle echoed through the speakers. You are coming to be evaluated, the architect corrected. The screen flickered back to GPS navigation. The secret passed. Rose stared at Pike with something resembling horror. He's never spoken directly to an outsider before, Ro whispered. Why now? Pike asked. Ro hesitated. Because you weren't just selected randomly, he said. Pike glanced at him sharply. What do you mean? Ro opened another hidden file on the tablet. Inside was Pike's photograph. Multiple photographs. Surveillance images from different cities, years apart. Case reports from his past investigations. Psychological evaluations. One document displayed a title that made Pike's pulse freeze. Subject Pike, long-term observation. Pike's voice dropped dangerously low. How long? Ro swallowed. 10 years. The personal target. Pike's mind raced as he processed the revelation. They've been watching me for a decade, he said. Yes, Ro admitted. Why didn't they take me earlier? Ro hesitated. You were classified as a late spiral candidate, he said quietly. Pike stared at him. Meaning? You required accumulated trauma and investigative experience to reach ideal psychological conditioning thresholds. Pike felt anger surge through him like wildfire. They let cases happen, disappearances, deaths, just to shape me into a better target? Ro didn't respond. He didn't need to. The trap ahead. Snow thinned as they crossed into flatter terrain, the storm gradually weakening. The GPS marker stabilized again, revealing their destination was now an isolated desert region nearly 12 hours away. Ro stared at it grimly. They're preparing for final convergence, he said. Pike nodded slowly. Then we stop them before they get there. Ro looked uncertain. You don't understand how protected the primary facility is, he said. Private security, automated defenses, underground bunker systems. I don't care, Pike interrupted. They've taken hundreds of people. Thousands, Ro corrected quietly. Pike's hands tightened around the wheel again. Then we stop them, he repeated. The silent tracker. Neither man noticed the blinking red indicator hidden beneath the van's dashboard, transmitting their exact location back to the Council's surveillance network. Miles behind them, a convoy of identical black vehicles merged onto the interstate. Tracking, closing, waiting, the final realization. As dusk settled across the horizon, Pike glanced again at the tablet showing Lena's status file still open. Her name glowed under the classification. Phase 1 survivor, transfer pending. He exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. We're gonna get her out, he said. Ro looked at him uncertainly. You're still thinking like this is a rescue mission, Ro said quietly. Pike stared ahead into the fading daylight. It is. Ro hesitated, then asked the question neither of them wanted to voice. What if she doesn't want to leave anymore? Pike didn't answer, but the silence between them spoke louder than any words. The storm was long behind them when the land began to change. Mountains flattened into barren plains. Pine forests faded into skeletal scrubland. By sunrise on the second day of driving, Detective Aaron Pike and Dr. Elias Rowe had crossed into desert territory where the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. The world felt empty here. Too empty. Pike's van sped across a narrow two-lane highway cutting through cracked earth and rust-colored sand dunes. Heat shimmer distorted the distance even in early morning light. Civilization had vanished hours ago. No gas stations, no towns, not even radio signals strong enough to carry music. Only static. Ro stared at the tablet, watching the blinking route slowly narrow toward its destination. They chose this region for a reason, he said quietly. Isolation, Pike replied. Not just that, Ro said. Underground stability. Minimal satellite interference. And historically, this land hides infrastructure well. Pike glanced at him briefly. You mean government testing zones? Ro nodded slowly. Abandoned military installations, he said. Cold War bunker systems. The architect repurposed many of them. Pike's stomach tightened. How big is this place? Ro hesitated before answering. Big enough to hold hundreds. The dead road. The GPS eventually directed Pike off the highway onto a forgotten service road barely visible beneath drifting sand. The asphalt cracked apart beneath their tires as they drove deeper into the desert basin. Several miles later, the road ended abruptly at what appeared to be a collapsed mining site. Rusted drilling towers, abandoned trailers, and warning signs half buried by time. Pike slowed the van. This is it, he asked skeptically. Rose studied the tablet carefully. Yes, he said, but the entrance won't be visible. Pike parked behind an overturned fuel truck, scanning the silent landscape through binoculars. Nothing moved. No guards. No vehicles. Just desert wind sweeping across skeletal machinery. It's too quiet, Pike muttered. Roe nodded. It's designed that way. The hidden gate. Roe climbed out of the van and walked toward the center of the abandoned site, scanning the ground carefully. Pike followed, weapon drawn, eyes sweeping the horizon for movement. After several minutes, Roe stopped near a circular concrete platform barely visible beneath drifting sand. This is it, he said. Pike crouched beside him, brushing away sand with his gloved hand. Embedded in the concrete was a biometric scanner disguised as a maintenance panel. You still have access? Pike asked. Roe hesitated. For now. He pressed his palm against the scanner. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then the desert ground trembled faintly. A deep mechanical rumble echoed beneath their feet as the entire concrete platform began sliding sideways, revealing a massive steel elevator descending into darkness. Cold air rushed upward from the opening, carrying the sterile scent Pike had come to associate with the network's facilities. Rose stepped toward the platform. If my clearance still works, this will take us inside Phase 2, he said. Pike nodded. Then let's end this. They stepped onto the elevator as the platform sealed behind them, lowering them into the earth. The underground city. The descent lasted nearly 2 full minutes. When the elevator finally stopped, Pike stepped into a massive subterranean complex that stole the breath from his lungs. The primary facility wasn't a bunker. It was an underground city. Bright artificial lighting stretched across multiple levels of steel catwalks, laboratory wings, living quarters, and containment blocks. Hundreds of personnel moved through the corridors, scientists, technicians, and uniformed security teams. Massive observation screens displayed psychological data, biometric tracking, and live surveillance footage of subjects inside testing chambers. Pike whispered under his breath. My God! Roe looked equally shaken, despite knowing what existed here. It's grown, he said quietly. Far beyond what I helped design. Blending in. Roe quickly grabbed 2 gray staff jackets from a nearby storage locker. Put this on, he whispered. Pike slid into the jacket, hiding his weapon beneath the fabric as they stepped onto one of the catwalks overlooking the main facility floor. Lena would be inside Phase 2 conditioning, Roe said. That means neurological testing and identity restructuring. Where? Pike asked. Roe pointed toward a massive reinforced wing marked with a spiral insignia twice the height of a person. There. The conditioning wing. The corridor leading to Phase 2 felt colder than the rest of the facility. Glass walls revealed rows of sterile white rooms where subjects sat strapped into reclining chairs surrounded by neural monitoring equipment. Some watched flashing light sequences on overhead screens. Others listened to audio loops through embedded headsets. Every subject wore identical white clothing now, stripped of personal identity markers. Pike's chest tightened as he scanned the faces. Then he saw her. Lena Calloway sat motionless inside Chamber 27, her eyes fixed on a pulsing light display, while electrodes lined her temples and neck. She's alive, Pike whispered. Roe nodded grimly. But not for long if Phase 2 completes. Pike stepped toward the chamber door. Suddenly, alarms blared. The security breach. Red emergency lights flooded the corridor as automated security shutters slammed across every exit. Armed guards flooded into the hallway within seconds, weapons raised. Roe's face drained of color. They tracked the van, he said. Pike pulled his weapon free, scanning for escape routes. Is there a manual override for the chambers? He asked. Yes, Roe said. Control room, level 3. Then move. The control room assault. They sprinted through maintenance corridors as guards closed in behind them. Gunfire echoed through the steel hallways as Pike returned fire, forcing pursuit teams to take cover. Roe led them through a ventilation shaft access point, crawling upward through narrow steel tunnels until they reached the Phase 2 control room overlooking the conditioning wing. Inside, technicians scrambled in panic as Pike kicked the door open. Override the chambers. Pike shouted, weapon raised. One technician lunged for a silent alarm button. Pike fired a warning shot that shattered the console inches from his hand. Now, Pike barked. Roe rushed to the central control panel, bypassing security protocols with shaking hands. Chamber sedation cycle shutting down, he said. Releasing subjects. Below them, the chamber doors slid open as neural systems powered down. Lena collapsed forward in her chair as technicians rushed toward her chamber. Go, Roe said. I'll hold this system open as long as I can. Pike nodded and sprinted back toward the conditioning wing. Lena awakens. Pike burst into chamber 27, just as Lena's eyes fluttered open. She stared at him blankly, confusion clouding her expression. Lena, he said gently. You're safe. I'm getting you out. Her gaze struggled to focus. You, she whispered faintly. Recognition flickered, then faded. They told me, she murmured weakly. Fear is illusion. Pike swallowed hard. Maybe, he said quietly. But hope isn't. He lifted her from the chair and helped her stand, supporting her weight as alarms intensified around them. The architect speaks. The facility lights dimmed suddenly as the architect's voice echoed across every speaker. Phase 2 disruption detected, he announced calmly. Personnel froze across the facility floor. Subject Pike, the architect continued. You continue to demonstrate exceptional adaptability. Pike ignored the voice as he helped Lena toward the exit corridor. You cannot dismantle convergence, the architect said. Evolution is inevitable. Pike stopped briefly, glaring toward the ceiling. Kidnapping isn't evolution, he said coldly. It's cowardice. The voice paused, almost thoughtfully. Then prove your philosophy superior, the architect replied. Emergency blast doors began sealing sections of the facility behind them. The mass evacuation. Roe rejoined them near the elevator shaft, breathless. I triggered partial evacuation protocols, he said. Subjects are being transferred deeper underground. How many? Pike asked. Roe's face twisted. Hundreds, maybe more. Pike clenched his jaw. We can't stop all of it today, Roe said quietly. But we can expose it. Pike nodded reluctantly. They stepped onto the elevator platform as armed guards flooded the lower corridors. Bullets sparked against steel railings as the elevator rose toward the desert surface. The surface escape. The elevator burst open into the abandoned mining site as Pike carried Lena toward the van. Roe jumped into the driver's seat, starting the engine as security vehicles emerged from hidden desert hangars in the distance. Go! Pike shouted. The van tore across the desert floor as dust plumes erupted behind them. Security vehicles gave chase, closing fast across the open terrain. Roe swerved violently around collapsed drilling towers as Pike fired from the passenger window, disabling one pursuing vehicle. The remaining convoy slowed, then stopped entirely. Pike frowned. They're letting us go, he said. Roe nodded grimly. They don't care about losing one subject, he said. They care about studying your next move. The new war. Lena stirred weakly in the back seat as Pike glanced toward her. You're safe now, he said softly. Her eyes opened slightly, unfocused but aware. They're still inside, she whispered. Pike nodded. Yes, he said quietly. He stared back toward the distant desert where the primary facility lay hidden beneath sand and steel. But not forever. The silent transmission. Unseen to Pike and Roe, a microscopic tracker embedded inside Lena's neural implant activated as her brainwaves stabilized. Its signal transmitted silently across encrypted satellite networks. Back inside the underground facility, the architect watched the signal update on his private monitor. Phase 3 begins, he whispered. The desert never truly slept. Even after sunset, heat lingered in the cracked earth like a warning. The wind whispered across abandoned highways and dry riverbeds, carrying sand that erased footprints almost as quickly as they formed them. Detective Marcus Hale stood outside the mobile command trailer, staring at the endless stretch of dunes surrounding the newly discovered third house. The air smelled like dust and tension. Behind him, floodlights illuminated the structure, a weathered ranch house standing alone in the Mojave wasteland. It looked harmless from a distance, ordinary, forgettable, but Marcus knew better. This was Phase 3, and everything about it felt wrong. Inside the trailer, Agent Sarah Vega leaned over a digital projection table. The glowing holographic map displayed red pins marking every known disappearance tied to the architect's network. Marcus stepped inside. Tell me you found something, he said. Sarah didn't look up. I have, she replied quietly. And you're not going to like it. Marcus crossed his arms. Try me. Sarah expanded the map with a swipe. New red dots appeared, hundreds of them, forming a massive circular pattern across 3 states. Marcus frowned. That wasn't there before. It wasn't visible before, Sarah corrected. She tapped a command, and the pins rearranged themselves into a complex geometric design. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. It wasn't random. It was precise. Every location, Sarah said, is positioned to create a layered containment system. Marcus shook his head slowly. Containment for what? Sarah finally turned toward him. For people. The pattern evolves. The new data had come from encrypted files recovered inside the second house, the one in rural Nevada. At first glance, they looked like architectural drafts. But when FBI analysts decrypted them, they revealed something far darker. Marcus studied the screen as Sarah zoomed into the desert region surrounding them. This house, she said, pointing at the ranch property outside, isn't just another holding site. Then what is it? Sarah hesitated. It's a staging ground. Marcus blinked. For transport? No, she said. For training. Silence filled the trailer. Marcus felt a cold wave ripple down his spine. You're saying they're conditioning victims? Sarah nodded grimly. We think Phase 3 is where they turn captives into operatives. The hidden rooms. An hour later, tactical teams entered the ranch house. Marcus led the first unit inside. The front room looked deceptively normal, dusty furniture, faded curtains, cracked ceiling paint. But the moment they stepped deeper inside, the illusion shattered. The hallway walls were lined with reinforced steel plates. Hidden cameras blinked to life as motion sensors activated emergency lighting. Marcus signaled the team forward. They reached a locked basement door reinforced with biometric scanners. Blow it, Marcus ordered. Seconds later, the lock shattered under controlled explosives. The door swung open, and Marcus immediately knew they'd found something worse than any holding cell. The basement stretched far below ground, expanding into a sprawling labyrinth of corridors. Rooms branched off in every direction. Training rooms, observation chambers, psychological conditioning cells. Marcus stepped into the first chamber. The walls were covered in mirrored glass. In the center stood a metal chair bolted to the floor, surrounded by overhead projectors and audio emitters. Sarah entered behind him, scanning the equipment. This is advanced behavioral programming, she whispered. Marcus examined the walls closer. Scratches covered the glass, hundreds of them. Desperate attempts to escape. On one wall, someone had carved a single word into the metal paneling. Obey. The files no one expected. In a secure server room hidden behind the labyrinth, digital forensics teams discovered thousands of encrypted video recordings. Marcus sat beside Sarah as the first file played. The footage showed victims sitting in identical chairs, restrained, exhausted, terrified. A masked figure spoke through a voice modulator. Survival requires adaptation, the voice said calmly. Images flashed rapidly across the screen, violent scenarios, threat simulations, escape drills. Marcus watched as victims were forced to complete tactical exercises under psychological stress. They're training them like soldiers, he murmured. Sarah nodded. But they're also breaking them. The footage cut to another recording. This time, Marcus leaned closer. The victim wasn't random. It was a man Marcus recognized from a missing persons case 3 years earlier. A search and rescue volunteer who vanished during a wildfire evacuation. Marcus clenched his jaw. They've been running this operation for years, he said. Sarah clicked another file and froze. Her breath caught. Marcus saw her expression change. What is it? She turned the screen toward him. Marcus's blood turned to ice. The video showed a group of captives undergoing training exercises. But one of them wasn't a victim anymore. He was giving instructions, guiding others through survival drills, leading them. Marcus whispered the name before he could stop himself. Daniel Foster. Sarah nodded. He disappeared in Phase 1. Marcus stared at the screen, stunned. He's not missing, he said quietly. He's working for them. The sudden signal. Before Marcus could process the revelation, alarms exploded across the compound. A tech analyst rushed into the trailer. Detective Hale, we just intercepted a signal transmission from inside the property. Marcus spun toward him. Origin. Sub-basement level, below the training facility. Marcus grabbed his radio. All units, lock down the perimeter. We're going underground. The sub-basement discovery. The hidden elevator leading below the labyrinth required retina access. But forensic teams bypassed the system within minutes. The elevator descended slowly into darkness. Marcus, Sarah, and 2 tactical officers waited in silence as the floor indicator dropped deeper than expected. Level B1, B2, B3. The doors finally opened. Cold air rushed inside. The underground level was enormous, a command center disguised beneath layers of psychological facilities. Rows of computer terminals blinked in the darkness. Large digital maps covered the far wall, and at the center of the room stood a massive operations table. Marcus stepped forward carefully. "Clear the area," he whispered. The tactical officers moved cautiously between rows of equipment. Sarah approached the main terminal and activated it. A live surveillance grid appeared. Marcus's chest tightened. It showed real-time footage from dozens of hidden locations across multiple states. Warehouses, safe houses, transit routes, supply hubs. It wasn't just a trafficking operation. It was an organized logistical empire, and it was still active. The trap springs. Suddenly, every screen in the command center flickered. The surveillance feeds vanished. A single symbol replaced them. The spiral. Marcus froze. Then a distorted voice filled the room. "You've advanced farther than most, Detective Hale." Marcus grabbed his radio. "Trace the signal." Sarah was already typing furiously. "Working on it, but it's bouncing through multiple encrypted relays." The voice continued. "Phase 3 exists to prepare assets. You were never meant to reach this level." Marcus stepped closer to the central console. "Then why leave it operational?" he demanded. A brief pause. "Because every hunt requires prey and predators." Marcus's pulse quickened. The spiral symbol began rotating slowly. Sarah's hands froze above the keyboard. "Marcus," she whispered. He turned toward her. "We've lost communication with every tactical team outside." Marcus felt dread settle in his chest. "What do you mean lost?" "They're not responding," she said. "Every signal just went dead. The desert moves." Outside the ranch house, FBI perimeter units stood watch across the barren desert. Night had fallen completely. Floodlights illuminated the compound in harsh white beams. Then, without warning, the lights shut off. Darkness swallowed the property. Agents reached for radios. Nothing but static answered them. Then movement appeared along the horizon. Shadowed figures emerged from the dunes, dozens of them, advancing silently toward the compound. Inside the command center, Marcus stared at Sarah. "They were expecting us," he said. "No," she replied slowly. "They're surrounding us." The realization. Sarah finally traced the signal source. Her face drained of color. Marcus stepped beside her. "Where is it?" She pointed at the digital map. Marcus stared at the blinking marker. It wasn't outside. It wasn't underground. It was inside the compound itself. Specifically, inside the training labyrinth they had just searched. Marcus's voice dropped. "Someone is still here." The voice returned through the speakers, calmer than before. "Phase 3 has one final objective, Detective." Marcus gripped his weapon. "And what's that?" The spiral symbol expanded across every monitor in the room. "To test adaptability." Suddenly, heavy metal doors slammed shut across the sub-basement exits. Emergency locks activated. Red lights flooded the chamber. Marcus turned toward Sarah. "We're trapped." Above them, faint echoes of footsteps began moving through the labyrinth corridors. Not frantic, not chaotic, disciplined, coordinated, trained. Sarah whispered the realization neither of them wanted to say aloud. "The victims." Marcus nodded slowly. "They've been turned into hunters." The countdown begins. The central operations table suddenly illuminated. A digital timer appeared. 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. 3 hours. Marcus stared at the screen. "What happens when it hits 0? He asked. The voice answered without hesitation. "Phase 4 begins." Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying his nerves. He checked his weapon, then turned to Sarah. "We're not waiting for them to come to us." Sarah met his gaze. "You have a plan?" Marcus glanced toward the sealed corridor doors. No, he admitted. Then he chambered around. But we're about to make one. Above them, footsteps echoed closer through the labyrinth. And for the first time since the investigation began, Marcus Hale realized they weren't investigating a criminal network anymore. They had become part of the architect's design, and the hunt had officially reversed. The timer glowed like a wound in the darkness. The red emergency lights inside the underground command center pulsed slowly, washing the room in blood-colored shadows. The low mechanical hum of locked steel doors echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat. Marcus Hale tightened his grip around his weapon, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Panic was exactly what the architect wanted. Sarah Vega stood beside the central console, frantically searching for any manual override. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, but every system returned the same answer. Access denied. They've locked us out of everything, she said. Marcus kept his eyes on the corridor. Then we stopped playing defense. Above them, footsteps echoed again, steady, synchronized, moving through the labyrinth corridors like soldiers preparing for battle. Not victims, not survivors. Soldiers. The first wave. The overhead security speakers crackled back to life. Phase 3 graduates, the distorted voice announced. Begin engagement. Marcus's jaw clenched. That voice, it's not automated anymore, Sarah whispered. Marcus nodded. He's watching us live. Suddenly, movement appeared at the far corridor entrance. Figures stepped into the red light. 5 of them. Each wore identical black tactical clothing with spiral insignias stitched into their sleeves. Their movements were calm, precise, terrifyingly coordinated. Marcus immediately recognized one face. Daniel Foster, once a rescue volunteer, now walking toward them with cold, focused eyes. Sarah whispered, "He looks different." Marcus noticed it too. Daniel's expression held no fear, no confusion, only discipline. Daniel raised his weapon slowly. Marcus fired first. Gunfire erupted across the chamber as tactical officers engaged the advancing group. Bullets struck metal walls, shattering glass panels and sending sparks into the air. But the attackers moved like they had rehearsed this moment. They split formation instantly, using cover positions inside the labyrinth entrance. One officer fell beside Marcus, struck in the shoulder. Sarah dragged him behind the operations table, while Marcus laid down suppressive fire. "Marcus!" she shouted. "They're flanking through the side corridors." Marcus glanced toward the secondary hallway. 2 more spiral operatives emerged from the darkness. "They know the layout better than we do," he muttered. Fighting the conditioned. The firefight escalated quickly. The spiral operatives didn't fire recklessly. They moved with calculated efficiency, covering each other with perfect tactical timing. Marcus ducked behind a steel pillar as rounds shattered overhead lighting fixtures. He studied their movements carefully. "They're not trying to kill us immediately," he said. Sarah reloaded her weapon beside him. "What do you mean?" "They're pushing us toward something." As if confirming his words, Daniel Foster shouted a command to the other operatives. They advanced slowly, tightening their formation while forcing Marcus and Sarah backward toward the inner data core room. "They're hurting us," Sarah realized. Marcus nodded. "Exactly. The data core." Marcus kicked open the reinforced door behind them and pulled Sarah and the wounded officer inside. The remaining tactical agent sealed the door manually with emergency locking clamps. Gunfire echoed outside as spiral operatives attempted to breach the room. The data core chamber was smaller, circular, lined with server towers humming with encrypted storage systems. Sarah immediately rushed to the central terminal. "This is the main storage cluster," she said breathlessly. "If we can access it, we might expose the entire network." Marcus glanced at the timer displayed across every monitor inside the chamber. 2 hours, 34 minutes, and 51 seconds. "You've got 20 minutes," he said. "Maybe less." Sarah began bypassing the encryption layers. Marcus turned toward the door, listening as the attackers attempted forced entry. The wounded officer groaned behind him. Marcus checked the man's injury quickly. "Stay with us," Marcus said. The officer nodded weakly. Marcus returned to the door and steadied his weapon. Outside, Daniel Foster's voice echoed through the hallway. "Detective Hale, you don't understand the system." Marcus shouted back through the reinforced steel. "Then explain it to me." A pause followed. Then Daniel spoke calmly. We were saved. Sarah froze mid-typing. Marcus frowned. Saved from what? Chaos, Daniel replied. The world abandons the lost. The architect gives them purpose. Marcus felt anger surge through him. You're kidnapping innocent people. They were already forgotten, Daniel responded coldly. Now they serve something greater. Marcus slammed his fist against the door. You're brainwashed. No, Daniel said quietly. We're evolved. Sarah's discovery. Inside the data core, Sarah's screen suddenly flickered as she broke through a major encryption layer. Marcus, I'm in. Marcus turned toward her. What did you find? Sarah's face paled. Financial routing systems. Recruitment databases. Training logs. She hesitated. And something else. Marcus stepped closer. What? Sarah opened a classified personnel directory. Marcus stared at the screen as dozens of high-level names appeared. Politicians, corporate executives, law enforcement officials. All connected. All secretly funding or protecting the architect's network. This isn't just trafficking, Sarah whispered. This is systemic infiltration. Marcus clenched his jaw. They built an army and hid it inside society. Sarah nodded. And Marcus? She zoomed into the founder profile at the top of the directory. The file name read, Architect, Primary Administrator. Marcus leaned closer as Sarah decrypted the final identity lock. The photograph loaded slowly. Marcus's entire body went rigid. No, he whispered. Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief. Marcus, do you know him? Marcus nodded slowly, his voice barely audible. Yeah. His hands trembled slightly. He trained me. The past returns. The photograph displayed a man in his early 60s. Gray hair. Calm eyes. Military posture. Colonel Richard Vale read. Marcus stepped backward, memories crashing into his mind. Vale had been his mentor during federal tactical training 15 years earlier. A decorated intelligence strategist. Officially deceased after a classified overseas operation. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. He taught counterinsurgency strategy, Marcus said. He specialized in psychological warfare and behavioral adaptation. Sarah stared at him. You're saying the architect is your former mentor? Marcus swallowed hard. Yes. The breach. Before Sarah could respond, explosions rocked the data core entrance. The spiral operatives had breached the outer corridor defenses. Marcus snapped back into focus. Copy everything, he ordered Sarah. We exposed this entire operation. Sarah began transferring files onto encrypted drives. Outside, cutting torches burned through the reinforced door hinges. Marcus turned to the wounded officer. Can you still shoot? The officer nodded weakly. Good, because they're coming through that door. The spiral war begins. The door finally burst open under explosive charges. Smoke and sparks filled the chamber as spiral operatives stormed inside. Marcus fired immediately, striking 2 attackers before diving behind server towers. Sarah grabbed a secondary weapon while continuing the data transfer. Gunfire thundered through the circular room, echoing off metal walls and shattered monitors. Daniel Foster entered last. He raised his weapon but hesitated as he saw Marcus directly across the chamber. Marcus, Daniel said. Marcus lowered his aim slightly. You don't have to do this, Marcus said. Daniel's expression flickered briefly, doubt breaking through conditioning. They saved me, Daniel whispered. Marcus stepped forward slowly. They stole your life. Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened. They gave me purpose. Marcus shook his head. They gave you chains. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then the speakers crackled again. Colonel Vale's voice filled the chamber. Daniel, complete the objective. Daniel's hesitation vanished instantly. He raised his weapon. Marcus fired first. The shot knocked Daniel backward, grazing his shoulder and sending him collapsing behind cover. The firefight resumed violently. The data escape. Sarah shouted over the chaos. Marcus, I've got 90% of the files. Marcus ducked incoming rounds. Finish it. The timer flashed across every screen. 1 hour 11 minutes and 9 seconds. Suddenly, the entire facility shook violently. Emergency seismic alarms activated. Sarah stared at her monitor in horror. Marcus, They're initiating structural collapse protocols. Marcus turned sharply. They're destroying the entire facility. To erase the evidence, Sarah said. The narrow escape. Sarah ripped the encrypted drives from the console. We have to move. Now. Marcus helped the wounded officer to his feet while covering their retreat toward the emergency maintenance tunnels shown on Sarah's map. Behind them, the spiral operatives regrouped and pursued. Corridors collapsed as automated demolition charges detonated across the underground levels. Dust and debris filled the air as Marcus and Sarah sprinted through the maintenance tunnels, barely staying ahead of collapsing walls. The timer flashed across Sarah's portable device. 32 minutes and 18 seconds. Marcus glanced back at the collapsing labyrinth. Vale's not just destroying evidence, he said. He's relocating the operation. Sarah nodded grimly. Phase 4. The escape to the surface. They burst through an emergency hatch leading outside the ranch house compound, just as the underground levels collapsed inward with a thunderous roar. The desert night swallowed them as the building began sinking into itself. Behind them, spiral operatives emerged from secondary exits, retreating into the darkness of the dunes. Marcus watched them disappear across the desert horizon. They're regrouping, he said. Sarah held up the encrypted drives tightly. And now we know who's leading them. Marcus stared into the desert winds. Colonel Richard Vale, the architect, and the man who once taught him everything he knew about strategy. Marcus's voice hardened. This war just became personal. The final warning. Sarah's satellite device suddenly beeped. A final encrypted message flashed across the screen. She opened it slowly. Marcus read over her shoulder. Phase 4 initiated. Primary target, Detective Marcus Hale. Marcus exhaled slowly. They're coming for us now. Sarah looked toward the rising desert dawn. No, she corrected quietly. They're coming for everyone. The desert dawn arrived without warmth. A pale orange glow stretched across the horizon, illuminating the smoking ruins of the ranch house as dust spiraled into the rising sun. What once stood as a hidden command facility had collapsed into a jagged crater, burying evidence beneath thousands of tons of sand and steel. Detective Marcus Hale stood at the edge of the wreckage, silent. Behind him, emergency helicopters circled the site while federal recovery teams combed through debris, hoping to salvage anything that might still remain. But Marcus already knew the truth. Colonel Richard Vale never left loose ends. Sarah Vega approached slowly, clutching the encrypted drives recovered from the data core. Her face was pale from exhaustion, but her eyes burned with determination. We confirmed it, she said quietly. Marcus didn't turn. Confirmed what? Vale is alive, and still operating at full capacity. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. I was afraid you'd say that. The surviving evidence. Inside a temporary federal command unit stationed miles from the collapsed compound, analysts worked around the clock decrypting the data Sarah recovered. Screens flickered with classified files, surveillance footage, financial transaction logs, and recruitment dossiers tied to the spiral network. Marcus and Sarah stood beside the lead analyst as he opened the most recent encrypted directive recovered from Vale's personal archive. Timestamp is from less than 6 hours ago, the analyst said. The file opened. A video recording began playing. Colonel Richard Vale appeared on screen, seated calmly inside a dimly lit control room. His silver hair was neatly combed, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos unfolding around him. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Vale looked exactly as he remembered. Cold. Precise. Unshaken. Vale spoke directly into the camera. If you are watching this, Detective Hale, it means you have successfully breached Phase 3. Marcus stepped closer to the screen. Sarah folded her arms tightly beside him. Vale continued. You always were my most promising student. Marcus clenched his jaw. You taught me how to dismantle insurgent networks, Marcus muttered under his breath. Sarah whispered, and he used that knowledge to build one. The grand design. Vale's recorded message shifted to holographic displays behind him, revealing an enormous operational map spanning the entire United States. Dozens of new spiral symbols flashed across major metropolitan areas. Phase 4, Vale said calmly, is not about concealment. It is about activation. Marcus felt dread crawl through his spine. Vale continued speaking with eerie composure. For years, society has ignored its most vulnerable citizens. Runaways, disaster survivors, forgotten soldiers, displaced families, the broken and abandoned. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. He's rationalizing it. Vale's eyes hardened. I've given them structure, discipline, purpose, and now they will serve as the foundation of a new order. The screen displayed coordinated infiltration plans, logistics hubs, supply chain disruption strategies, communications sabotage grids. Marcus realized with horror what Vale had built. This isn't trafficking anymore, he said. It's domestic warfare. The true target. Vale's message continued. However, transformation requires resistance. Marcus stared at the screen, knowing what was coming next. And resistance requires a symbol, Vale said. The screen shifted. Marcus's photograph appeared across the display. Detective Marcus Hale represents the final obstacle to Phase 4. Sarah turned toward Marcus slowly. Marcus. Vale leaned closer to the camera. You were trained to dismantle systems like mine. Your instincts, your adaptability, they make you dangerous. Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears. But every strategist knows, Vale continued, the best way to defeat a weapon is to study it. Predict it. Control it. The recording ended. Silence filled the command center. The nationwide activation. An alarm suddenly erupted across the operations unit. Analysts scrambled across workstations as emergency alerts flooded federal databases. Sarah rushed toward a communications terminal. Marcus, spiral operatives are surfacing across multiple cities simultaneously. Marcus turned sharply. How many locations? Sarah stared at the screen, stunned. 37 confirmed incidents, and climbing. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. What kind of incidents? Sabotage operations, infrastructure disruptions, coordinated kidnappings, cyber attacks targeting emergency response networks. Marcus exhaled sharply. He's creating chaos. Sarah nodded, and forcing federal resources to spread thin. The personal strike. Before Marcus could respond, his secure phone vibrated. He glanced at the caller ID. Unknown encrypted number. Marcus answered cautiously. Marcus Hale. Silence greeted him. Then a familiar voice spoke calmly. Hello, Marcus. Marcus froze. Vale. Sarah looked at him immediately. Vale's voice remained composed, almost conversational. I must admit, you exceeded my expectations. Marcus stepped outside the command unit, gripping the phone tightly. You built an army out of kidnapped civilians, Marcus said coldly. That's not strategy. That's evil. Vale chuckled softly. History rarely remembers morality, Marcus. Only victory. Marcus stared across the empty desert highway. You're going to lose. Perhaps, Vale replied. But not today. Marcus's stomach tightened. What do you want? Vale paused. I want you to understand something before this ends. Marcus said nothing. You were never meant to stop Phase 4, Vale continued. You were meant to trigger it. Marcus's heart skipped. What are you talking about? Vale's voice softened slightly. Every move you made forced my network to accelerate. You exposed weak cells, eliminated unreliable assets, strengthened operational efficiency. Marcus felt nausea rising in his chest. You used me. No, Vale corrected calmly. I refined my system through you. The hidden location. Marcus forced himself to stay focused. Where are you, Vale? Vale hesitated briefly. Still learning, I see. Marcus gritted his teeth. I'm ending this. Vale sighed quietly. You already know where to find me, Marcus. You just haven't realized it yet. The call disconnected. Marcus stood frozen, replaying Vale's final words in his mind. You already know where to find me. Sarah's breakthrough. Marcus rushed back inside as Sarah flagged him down urgently. Marcus, I think I found something. She displayed a hidden financial routing trail buried deep within the Spiral Network's offshore accounts. Marcus leaned closer. Explain it. Sarah zoomed into transaction clusters. Vale has been funding Phase 4 through disaster relief supply chains. Marcus frowned. That doesn't make sense. Sarah pointed at shipment logs. These deliveries aren't random. They're being routed through a central distribution facility. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Where? Sarah pulled up satellite coordinates. Marcus's breath caught. The location wasn't overseas. It wasn't hidden in the desert. It was shockingly familiar. A decommissioned federal disaster training complex located in Colorado. Marcus stepped backward slowly. That facility. Sarah turned toward him. You know it. Marcus nodded, voice tight. It's where Vale trained elite federal tactical units 15 years ago. The emotional truth. Sarah stared at him carefully. He built his headquarters in the place that created him. Marcus nodded. And the place that trained me. Sarah stepped closer. Marcus, this isn't coincidence. He wants you to come. Marcus met her gaze. I know. The decision. Federal command officers quickly authorized a covert strike operation on the Colorado facility, once Sarah verified satellite surveillance confirming heavy spiral activity inside the compound. Marcus stood in the aircraft hangar as tactical teams prepared for deployment. Sarah approached him quietly. You don't have to lead this raid alone. Marcus adjusted his tactical vest. He trained me there. I know every corridor, every emergency exit, every blind spot. Sarah studied his expression. This is personal now. Marcus nodded slowly. It always was. Vale's final broadcast. As helicopters prepared for departure, emergency alerts erupted across national broadcasting systems. Every television, phone, and digital billboard across multiple states suddenly displayed a live transmission. Colonel Richard Vale appeared once again, addressing the public directly. The world you trust is fragile, Vale said calmly. Systems fail. Governments abandon. Institutions collapse. Marcus watched from the hangar floor, his fists clenched. But from collapse, order can be reborn, Vale continued. The screen shifted to show spiral operatives moving through coordinated operations across cities nationwide. Sarah whispered, he's declaring war. Vale leaned closer to the camera. Tonight marks the beginning of societal correction. Marcus whispered under his breath. No, it ends tonight. The countdown to confrontation. Marcus boarded the helicopter beside Sarah and the tactical strike team. As the aircraft lifted into the darkening sky, Marcus stared out the window, watching the desert disappear beneath them. Sarah sat beside him, holding the encrypted drives tightly. You ready? She asked quietly. Marcus thought about everything Vale had taken. The victims, the manipulated survivors, the stolen lives. Marcus finally nodded. Yeah, he said, because this time, I'm not his student. The helicopter disappeared into the storm clouds, racing toward the Colorado mountains where the spiral network's creator waited, and where Marcus Hale would finally confront the man who built the nightmare. The Colorado mountains rose like black silhouettes against the storm-choked sky. Snow whipped across the jagged peaks, carried by winds strong enough to rattle the helicopter as it sliced through the clouds. Lightning flashed across the horizon, briefly illuminating the abandoned federal disaster training complex buried deep within the Rockies. Marcus Hale stared through the side window as the facility came into view. Floodlights burned across the compound perimeter. Armored vehicles patrolled the outer fences. Motion sensors flickered across snow-covered watchtowers. The spiral network hadn't just occupied the complex. They had fortified it. Sarah Vega adjusted her headset, listening to encrypted tactical channels as federal strike teams positioned themselves across the mountain ridges. Satellite confirms at least 80 spiral operatives inside, she said. Possibly more underground. Marcus nodded slowly. He won't run, Marcus said. Sarah glanced at him. You sound certain. Marcus's eyes remained fixed on the compound below. Vale never runs. He waits. The infiltration begins. The helicopter landed 2 miles from the facility to avoid detection. Snow crunched beneath Marcus's boots as he stepped onto the frozen mountainside, breath fogging in the bitter air. Around him, elite tactical teams assembled in silent formation. Commander Elias Rourke, leader of the Federal Strike Unit, approached Marcus. Your intel says there's a subterranean command level beneath the main training hall, Rourke said. Marcus nodded. 3 levels underground. Vale built them during classified counter-terror training programs. Emergency bunkers, communications centers, psychological conditioning chambers. Rourke studied him carefully. You trained there? Marcus met his gaze. I survived there. Rourke nodded once. Then you lead the internal strike. Marcus turned toward Sarah. You stay with Surveillance Command. Sarah shook her head instantly. No chance. Marcus frowned. Sarah, I decrypted half the spiral network, she said firmly. I'm not stopping now. Marcus studied her expression, then nodded reluctantly. Stay close. The silent breach. Under cover of the blizzard, strike teams advanced toward the facility perimeter. Snow muffled their movements as they approached the outer security fence. Thermal scanners revealed armed spiral guards patrolling in synchronized rotations. Marcus whispered into his comm. Rotate assault teams on my mark. Disable towers first. No alarms. Charges were placed along the fencing grid. Precision sniper teams positioned themselves across ridge lines. Marcus raised his hand. 3-2-1 mark. Silenced gunfire cracked through the storm as guards collapsed simultaneously. Explosive cutters tore through the reinforced fence, allowing strike teams to flood inside the compound. Within seconds, alarms blared across the facility. Red emergency lights ignited across the snow-covered courtyard. They expected us, Sarah muttered. Marcus replied calmly. Good. The training hall assault. The main training building stood like a fortress of reinforced steel and concrete. Spiral operatives emerged from every entrance, opening fire as federal teams advanced. Snow exploded into white plumes as bullets tore across the courtyard. Marcus and Sarah sprinted alongside tactical officers toward the eastern entryway. Marcus kicked open the side access door, leading his team into the dark interior. The familiar layout struck him instantly. The echoing corridors, the reinforced training chambers, the steel doors lining both walls. Memories surfaced violently, endless drills, simulated combat scenarios, Vale's voice echoing through training speakers. Marcus forced himself back into the present. They'll funnel us toward the central hall, he said. Sarah glanced around nervously. How do you know? Marcus's voice hardened. Because that's where Vale tests his students. The spiral defense. As they moved deeper into the facility, spiral operatives launched coordinated ambushes from hidden maintenance corridors and ceiling hatches. These weren't desperate defenders. They were trained soldiers executing precise tactical formations. Marcus recognized several techniques instantly. They're using Vale's counterinsurgency doctrines, he said. Sarah ducked behind cover as bullets shattered overhead lights. He trained them using your training methods. Marcus nodded grimly. Yes, but he forgot one thing. What? Marcus stepped from cover and signaled his team through a blind corridor, bypassing the spiral ambush positions. I know his weaknesses too. The descent underground. After securing the upper training levels, Marcus led the strike team toward a hidden elevator concealed behind an emergency medical simulation room. Marcus placed his hand against the biometric scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scanner flashed green. Sarah blinked. It still recognizes you. Marcus stared at the elevator doors. Vale never deletes contingency plans. The elevator descended slowly. Level B1, B2, B3. The doors opened into a massive underground command facility, far larger than anything discovered in previous spiral compounds. Rows of tactical command stations filled the cavernous chamber. Spiral operatives scrambled across consoles, coordinating nationwide operations. The moment they saw Marcus and the strike team, chaos erupted. Gunfire thundered across the underground complex as federal teams pushed forward, dismantling command stations and seizing control of communication arrays. Sarah rushed toward the central terminal, connecting her encryption drives. I can shut down spiral communication grids from here, she shouted. Marcus nodded. Do it. The architect appears. The lights suddenly dimmed. Gunfire slowed. A single spotlight illuminated the far end of the chamber. Colonel Richard Vale stepped forward from the shadows. He wore a pristine black tactical coat, bearing the spiral insignia over his chest. His posture was calm, composed, completely unafraid. Marcus, Vale said, his voice echoing across the chamber. Marcus lowered his weapon slightly, stepping forward alone. You built all of this, Marcus said. Vale nodded slowly. I perfected it. Marcus gestured toward the fallen spiral operatives and destroyed command stations. You destroyed lives. Vale's expression never changed. I repurposed them. The psychological war. The two men stood facing each other across the ruined command center, while gunfire echoed faintly in distant corridors. Vale clasped his hands behind his back. You still believe in chaos disguised as freedom, Vale said calmly. Marcus shook his head. I believe people deserve choice. Vale smiled faintly. Choice creates weakness. Marcus stepped closer. You kidnapped innocent people. Vale tilted his head slightly. Innocence is a social illusion, Marcus. Society abandons its weak. I simply reorganized them into something useful. Marcus's fists clenched. They weren't tools. Vale's eyes darkened slightly. Neither were you, but you were shaped into one. Marcus felt those words hit deeper than expected. Vale continued softly. I trained you because you understood survival. Discipline. Adaptability. You were my greatest success. Marcus's voice hardened. And I'm your greatest mistake. The final battle ignites. Suddenly, Spiral operatives launched a final defensive assault from hidden tunnel corridors, forcing Federal teams into close-quarters combat throughout the underground facility. Explosions rocked the chamber as Sarah struggled to complete the system shutdown. I need 5 more minutes, she shouted. Marcus stepped closer toward Vale. This ends now. Vale slowly removed a concealed sidearm. Agreed. Gunfire erupted between them as both men dove for cover behind command consoles. Their duel mirrored their shared training, calculated movements, tactical precision, silent anticipation between shots. Marcus maneuvered through cover positions Vale himself had designed years earlier. Vale anticipated most of Marcus's moves, but not all. Marcus triggered an emergency smoke system, flooding the chamber with dense fog. Vale fired blindly as Marcus moved silently through the haze, circling behind him using ventilation access paths known only to elite trainees. Marcus emerged behind Vale, weapon aimed directly at his back. Drop it, Marcus commanded. Vale froze. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. The collapse of the spiral. Across the chamber, Sarah slammed the final command key. Every monitor in the facility flashed simultaneously. Spiral network, global communication failure. Tactical teams reported nationwide arrests as Spiral cells lost coordination and command structure. Sarah exhaled in relief. Marcus, it's done. Marcus kept his weapon trained on Vale. For you, it is, Marcus said quietly. Vale turned slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze. I underestimated your emotional loyalty, Vale admitted. Marcus shook his head. You underestimated humanity. Vale smiled faintly. Perhaps. The arrest. Federal agents stormed the chamber, surrounding Vale in seconds. As they restrained him, Vale leaned closer toward Marcus. You think this ends here? Vale whispered. Marcus met his gaze firmly. It does. Vale chuckled quietly. Systems like mine never truly disappear, Marcus. They evolve. Marcus said nothing. Vale was escorted away in handcuffs as snow continued falling across the mountain complex above them. The war is over. Or is it? Sarah approached Marcus slowly as emergency crews secured the facility. You okay? She asked. Marcus stared at the collapsing spiral symbol displayed across destroyed monitors. For now, he said. Sarah studied him carefully. You know he meant what he said. Marcus nodded. Yeah. He glanced toward the elevator leading back to the surface. But we ended the architect. Sarah followed his gaze. And the spiral? Marcus exhaled slowly. Spirals never stopped turning. Snow fell silently across the Colorado Mountain facility as dawn broke over the captured compound. Emergency vehicles crowded the landing zones. Helicopters rotated in slow, steady patterns above the shattered spiral headquarters, while federal recovery teams escorted dozens of detained operatives from the underground complex. The storm had passed, but the damage remained. Detective Marcus Hale stood outside the main entrance, watching as Colonel Richard Vale was escorted into an armored transport vehicle. Vale's posture remained calm, composed, almost dignified despite the restraints binding his wrists. For a moment, Vale turned and locked eyes with Marcus through the armored glass. There was no anger in Vale's expression. No regret, only quiet calculation. The transport doors slammed shut, severing the connection between mentor and student forever. Marcus exhaled slowly, unsure if relief or emptiness filled his chest. Behind him, Sarah Vega stepped into the cold mountain air, wrapping her coat tighter around her shoulders. It's over, she said quietly. Marcus stared at the disappearing convoy as it descended the mountain road. Yeah, he replied. But even as he spoke, he wasn't sure he believed it. The nationwide fallout. Within hours of Vale's capture, federal authorities launched coordinated operations across the country. Spiral safe houses were raided. Hidden training facilities were exposed. Dozens of high-ranking officials secretly connected to the network were arrested in sweeping federal indictments that stunned the nation. News networks flooded with breaking headlines. Secret trafficking network exposed. Former military strategist arrested in massive conspiracy. Survivors rescued from years of captivity. Sarah sat inside the temporary operations center reviewing incoming reports while Marcus leaned against a nearby wall, listening silently. Over 400 victims recovered so far, Sarah said. More being located every hour. Marcus nodded slowly. Alive? Most of them, Sarah replied. But many are heavily conditioned. Some don't even recognize themselves anymore. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Vale hadn't just stolen lives. He had rewritten them. The survivors speak. Weeks later, Marcus and Sarah traveled to a secured rehabilitation center in Northern California where rescued victims began undergoing psychological recovery treatment. The facility was quiet, peaceful, designed to feel safe, something many survivors hadn't experienced in years. Marcus walked slowly through a therapy wing, stopping as he saw a familiar face sitting across from a counselor. Daniel Foster, the former rescue volunteer, the spiral operative who nearly killed him. Daniel looked fragile now, his tactical confidence replaced with hollow uncertainty. His shoulders still bore the scar from Marcus's bullet. Sarah stood beside Marcus as Daniel glanced up. Recognition flickered in his eyes. I remember pieces, Daniel said quietly, but it feels like watching someone else control my body. Marcus stepped closer. You weren't responsible for what they did to you. Daniel swallowed hard. I trained others. I helped them capture people. Marcus placed a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder. You survived, Marcus said. That matters now. Daniel nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes for the first time. For Marcus, it was the moment he realized the war wasn't just about stopping the spiral. It was about helping people reclaim themselves. The Court of Judgment. Colonel Richard Vale's trial became one of the most watched federal prosecutions in modern history. Courtrooms overflowed with journalists, federal officials, survivors, and families of the missing. The charges against Vale stretched across dozens of pages. Human trafficking, organized kidnapping, terrorism conspiracy, psychological torture, and mass civil rights violations. Marcus sat quietly in the courtroom gallery as prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence retrieved from Spiral Command archives. Financial records, training footage, recruitment logs. Every piece painted the same horrifying picture. Vale never denied his involvement. Instead, he defended it. The world operates through controlled systems, Vale stated calmly during his testimony. I simply improved the design. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Marcus watched him speak with the same composed authority Vale once used during training briefings. Sarah whispered beside him. He still believes he was right. Marcus nodded. He built his entire identity around it. The final verdict. After a 6-week trial, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on all counts. Vale received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. As federal marshals escorted Vale from the courtroom, he paused briefly near Marcus. You dismantled the spiral, Vale said quietly. Marcus didn't respond. Vale's eyes narrowed slightly. But systems always rebuild themselves, Marcus. Always. Marcus finally met his gaze. Not while people like you are locked away. Vale smiled faintly as he was let out. For the first time, Marcus noticed something different in his former mentor's expression. Not confidence, not calculation, something closer to resignation. The hidden remnants. Months passed as the spiral network continued collapsing under federal investigations. Thousands of hidden connections surfaced across corporate, political, and intelligence sectors. But not every cell was found. Sarah sat in her office late one evening reviewing encrypted communications intercepted from a suspected remnant spiral faction. The message was brief. Spirals never break. They adapt. Sarah stared at the screen before quietly closing the file. Some battles, she realized, didn't truly end. Marcus faces himself. Marcus took extended leave following the trial, retreating to a quiet lakeside town in Montana. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing leads or preparing tactical raids. He spent mornings fishing alone and evenings staring across still water that reflected the endless sky. But peace didn't come easily. Vale's voice still echoed in his mind. The training drills, the psychological conditioning, the realization that Marcus himself had been shaped by the same man he ultimately destroyed. One evening, Sarah arrived unannounced, walking down the dock where Marcus sat silently. "You planning to disappear out here forever?" she asked. Marcus chuckled softly. Thinking about it, Sarah sat beside him. "You stopped one of the largest criminal networks in modern history," she said. "You're allowed to rest." Marcus stared across the lake. "Do you ever wonder if Vale was right about one thing?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What thing?" "That systems don't disappear," Marcus said quietly. "They evolve." Sarah considered that carefully. "Maybe," she admitted. Then she looked directly at him. "But so do people." Marcus finally smiled. The new mission. Months later, Marcus returned to federal service, not as a field operative, but as director of a newly created national task force focused on preventing trafficking networks and supporting survivor rehabilitation programs. Sarah joined him as chief intelligence coordinator. Together, they used the recovered spiral data to dismantle emerging criminal networks before they could grow. Marcus spent his days training new agents, emphasizing one lesson above all others. Criminal organizations aren't just about money or power, he told recruits. They're about control, and control thrives when people feel invisible. He paused, remembering every survivor he had met. Your job is to make sure no one is invisible again. The final reflection. 1 year after Vale's arrest, Marcus and Sarah attended a memorial ceremony honoring victims lost to the spiral network. Families lit candles along a quiet memorial wall engraved with hundreds of names, victims who never returned. Marcus stood silently as survivors placed photographs beside the candles, reclaiming the identities Vale tried to erase. Sarah stepped beside him. "You did something good, Marcus." Marcus shook his head gently. "We did." The wind carried candlelight reflections across the polished stone wall, forming swirling patterns that reminded Marcus of the spiral symbol. But this time, the spirals were made of light, not darkness. The last message. Later that night, Marcus returned to his office. Waiting on his desk sat a sealed envelope forwarded from a maximum security federal prison. No return address. Marcus opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten note. Vale's handwriting was unmistakable. Every system believes it has achieved justice. But justice is simply another form of order. And order always seeks rebirth. RV. Marcus stared at the note for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside a locked evidence file. He turned off the office lights and stepped into the hallway where Sarah waited. "Everything okay?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus glanced back once more at the darkened office behind him. "The spiral may never fully disappear," he admitted. Sarah opened the building doors, letting sunlight pour into the hallway. "Then we make sure it never controls anyone again." Marcus stepped into the light beside her. For the first time since the investigation began, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. Story 2. In a quiet suburban town, neighbors always said nothing ever happened on Hawthorne Street, until an entire family vanished overnight, leaving behind only a cryptic message smeared in blood on their kitchen wall. The investigation would uncover secrets that no one wanted exposed, and a darkness that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Detective Lena Price hadn't slept well in weeks, but the call she received that night jolted her fully awake. The dispatcher's voice trembled slightly over the radio. "Detective Price, 47, Hawthorne Street. Entire family reported missing. No signs of forced entry, no evidence yet." Lena's hand tightened around the steering wheel as she drove through the fog-drenched streets. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across manicured lawns. Hawthorne Street had always seemed serene, the kind of place where doors were left unlocked and neighbors waved to each other. But tonight, the silence was oppressive. When Lena arrived at the address, she was met by a scene straight out of a nightmare. The house stood in darkness, its front porch light dangling loosely. The door creaked open as if inviting her inside. The living room was immaculate, too immaculate. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture. But the kitchen was different. Lena's flashlight beam fell on the most horrifying sight. A message smeared in blood on the white tiled wall. Some secrets refused to die. The blood was fresh, stark against the sterile background. It wasn't signed, and yet Lena felt an immediate chill run down her spine. She stepped closer, careful not to touch anything. On the counter, a small collection of photos lay scattered. Family portraits. Smiling faces frozen in happier times. One photo, however, had been ripped in half. A man's face, unfamiliar, was missing entirely. Lena's heart raced. This wasn't a simple disappearance. Someone, or something, wanted a message sent. Detective Lena Price spent the first hour outside Hawthorne Street pacing under the flickering streetlights, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Crime scene tape rustled softly in the wind, marking the boundary between the real world and the horror that lurked inside the Wallace home. She finally allowed herself to enter. Inside, the smell of antiseptic mixed with something metallic, the lingering tang of blood. Her flashlight carved sharp beams through the darkness, landing on the kitchen where the cryptic message remained. Some secrets refused to die. Lena crouched beside the counter where the scattered family photos had fallen. Her trained eyes scanned every detail. The images themselves seemed normal, snapshots of suburban life. Children's birthdays, family vacations, smiles frozen in time. Except for the ripped photo. Someone had deliberately removed a face, a man's face, the figure at the center of the family's last photograph together. The fact that it had been torn from the edges suggested a sudden rage, not a careful removal. She picked up a small piece of the torn photo, examining it. The edges were jagged. A faint trace of blood on the corner suggested the person responsible hadn't been careful. Lena's stomach tightened. Whoever did this had been here, and they hadn't planned on leaving anything behind, except the message. "Detective Price?" A voice called from behind. She turned to see Officer Miguel Alvarez, one of the first responders, stepping into the kitchen. His face was pale, eyes wide. "What have we got?" Lena asked. Miguel shook his head. No forced entry. No signs of struggle in the living room or bedrooms. Beds made. Meals untouched. But the fridge was open. Milk spilled, but nothing else missing. Lena frowned. "That's odd. Usually if someone's planning to vanish, they take food, valuables, or at least lock the doors." Miguel shrugged. "Nothing taken. All the family's wallets, phones, even the dog's leash was still hanging on the hook." Lena's mind raced. A family disappearing without a trace. No ransom note. No apparent motive. But the blood message said otherwise. Someone wanted them to see it. Someone wanted them afraid. She moved to the living room and ran her hands along the furniture, careful not to disturb fingerprints. Her eyes fell on a small, metal safe tucked behind the couch. Miguel followed her gaze. "Do you think it's—" "Possibly." Lena crouched, examining the dial. "If the family kept anything here, it's probably in this safe." With a practiced hand, she retrieved the master override key from her evidence kit, a tool used in cases where imminent danger required quick access. The dial clicked into place, and the safe opened. Inside, there was only a single envelope, yellowed and brittle with age. Lena carefully lifted it and opened it. Inside was a stack of handwritten letters, all folded neatly, the ink slightly smudged in places as though they had been read in haste or fear. Lena scanned the first letter. "If you are reading this, the truth has finally caught up. The Wallaces are in danger not because of money or envy. They are being hunted for what they know, what they should never have discovered. Never trust the neighbors. Never leave your doors unlocked. And never, ever question the past." She felt a chill creep down her spine. Whoever wrote this wasn't merely warning the family. They were warning whoever might find these letters next. Miguel leaned closer. "Detective, this is unsettling. Do you think the family saw this coming?" Lena shook her head. "I don't think they had time. Whoever took them moved fast, and they were professional. But these letters suggest the Wallaces stumbled onto something they shouldn't have." Her eyes swept the room again. Something was nagging at her, a detail she hadn't noticed before. On the wall above the mantel, there was a small, framed map of the town. Nothing unusual at first glance, except for faint markings in the corner. Lena stepped closer. There were tiny red dots arranged in what appeared to be a spiral pattern. She traced them with her finger. The dots corresponded to houses in the surrounding neighborhood, but not all of them. Only certain houses. "Look at this," she said, pointing to Miguel. "These dots, they're not random. Someone is tracking locations, maybe even people." Miguel's brow furrowed. "So, you think the Wallaces were targeted?" Lena nodded. "More than that, they were likely victims of a long-term plan. And judging by these letters, they discovered it by accident. Following the trail. By sunrise, Lena had assembled a small task force. The first priority, interviewing neighbors. Everyone on Hawthorne Street seemed shocked, but there was an undertone of hesitation, a silent tension, as if some unspoken fear ran through the block. Most neighbors reported nothing unusual the previous night. No strange vehicles, no disturbances, no sounds. But one elderly neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, finally spoke when Lena insisted on speaking with her. I didn't see anything," she said, voice shaking. "But sometimes, I hear noises, whispers in the night, people moving when no one should be there. My husband used to say the street has secrets." Lena leaned forward. "Secrets?" Mrs. Whitaker's eyes darted nervously. "Old ones. Decades old. People have vanished before, but the police, they never looked too hard. They thought it was just the way of the neighborhood. But now, I don't know. I'm scared to leave my house at night." That was the first real clue. A pattern. Vanishings in the past that were never solved. Lena's pulse quickened. She scribbled notes furiously. "Do you remember names? Houses?" she asked. Mrs. Whitaker nodded. "Yes, the Callaways, the Hendricks family, the Thompsons. All gone. All on the east side. And there's a pattern. Always a spiral pattern in the town maps. I never understood why." Lena froze. The spiral. The same symbol she had noticed in the Wallaces' home. "Thank you," Lena said. "You've been very helpful." But as Mrs. Whitaker closed her door, Lena felt a deeper chill. Someone was orchestrating disappearances for decades, carefully selecting families. And now the Wallaces were the latest victims. Cryptic connections. Back at the precinct, Lena and her team began cross-referencing old missing person reports with the current findings. "Every family that disappeared fits the pattern," said Officer Rivera, pointing at a digital map. "See here? East side, spiral layout, every 10 years like clockwork. The Wallaces just broke the cycle." Lena rubbed her temples. "So whoever is doing this, they're organized. And they're patient." Sarah Nguyen, the team's lead analyst, pulled up another file. "There's more. Look at these property transactions. All the previous missing families' houses were eventually purchased by the same company, a shell corporation. Nothing on record ties it to anyone directly, but there's a web of connections. We're looking at decades of meticulous planning." Lena's voice hardened. "And now the Wallaces are in the middle of it. Whoever runs this, they've been watching the town for decades." The cryptic clue. Later that night, Lena returned to the Wallace home with a small team of forensic specialists. She needed to understand the spiral map on the wall better. Using a blacklight, she discovered faint markings almost invisible to the naked eye, numbers and letters etched beside each red dot. It formed coordinates, not addresses, but precise geolocations. And they corresponded to specific landmarks, abandoned warehouses, old playgrounds, even derelict industrial buildings. "Someone's marking their territory," Lena muttered. "Or their hunting grounds." Miguel frowned. "So the Wallaces wandered into the wrong neighborhood, or maybe the wrong city?" "No," Lena said firmly. "They stumbled into the wrong network. The letters, the map, the spiral pattern. Everything pointed toward a single conclusion. The Wallaces were part of a long-term selection. Someone had carefully curated the victims, removing them methodically, sending messages, and leaving warnings for anyone who might pry." Lena felt the weight of history pressing down on her. This was bigger than a single family, a single crime. Whoever orchestrated these vanishings had decades of experience. And now, with the Wallaces, the trail had gone cold, unless she could follow the clues left behind in the shadows. The night surveillance. Lena stationed her team around the neighborhood, using night vision cameras and thermal imaging to monitor the area. Hours passed with nothing, until a movement flickered across one of the cameras. A figure moved silently across the backyards, stopping briefly to survey the area. Lena zoomed in. The person wore a hood, gloves, and carried a small briefcase. "She's a ghost," whispered Rivera. "No one would notice her." Lena's hand tightened around her radio. "Do not engage," she instructed. "Follow her. Record everything." The figure moved toward the Wallace's backyard, stopped, and placed a small metallic object on the ground. Then, as silently as she appeared, she vanished into the night. Lena approached the spot cautiously. The object was a key, a small brass key attached to a spiral-shaped fob. Lena held it up under the flashlight. Her heart pounded. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself. "This is just the beginning." The unseen enemy. Hours later, Lena sat in her car outside the Wallace home, staring at the darkened house. The storm clouds from the previous day had cleared, leaving a cold, silent night. She knew the spiral symbol wasn't random. The letters, the map, the mysterious figure, it was all part of something larger. Someone had been orchestrating these disappearances for decades, watching, waiting, and now, with the Wallaces, the spiral had completed a new rotation. And Lena knew one thing. To uncover the truth, she had to follow the spiral all the way into the shadows where no one dared to go. The investigation had just begun. The following morning, Detective Lena Price returned to the Wallace home with a sense of urgency she couldn't shake. Every minute the investigation stalled increased the chance that the family, if they were still alive, would be moved further from the neighborhood. The storm from the previous night had left the street damp, the fog lifting slowly to reveal the familiar suburban facades. Hawthorne Street looked as ordinary as ever. Perfectly trimmed lawns, mailboxes aligned like soldiers, but Lena knew better now. Behind every front door, someone could be hiding, watching, waiting. She reviewed the clues again. The cryptic blood message, the spiral map marked with red dots, the brass key left by the mysterious figure. Each element seemed random at first glance, but together they suggested meticulous planning. Sarah Nguyen, the team's analyst, met her at the Wallace home. Her laptop was open, displaying a digital overlay of Hawthorne Street with previous disappearances mapped in red. "It's the spiral pattern again," Sarah said, pointing at the screen. "Look at this. The Wallaces, the Callaways, the Hendricks family, and even the Thompsons from decades ago. The locations form an incomplete spiral that converges in the northeast sector of town." Lena leaned closer. "And the brass key?" Sarah nodded. "It's likely a clue to the next step. Whoever took the Wallaces wants someone to find it. The key isn't random. It probably unlocks something, maybe a safe house or a stash." Following the key, Lena drove carefully through the northeast sector of town, following the coordinates Sarah extracted from the spiral map. The streets became narrower, lined with overgrown hedges and derelict houses that seemed untouched for decades. The neighborhood had long since fallen off municipal radar, perfect for hiding secrets. They stopped in front of an old Victorian house, paint peeling, windows shuttered, and an air of neglect surrounding it. Sarah compared the key fob with the rusty lock on the front gate. "It matches," she said, sliding the key into the lock. The lock clicked open, an eerie sound echoing across the empty street. Lena drew her weapon instinctively, signaling her team to take positions. The front yard was overgrown with weeds taller than her knees, and the broken path leading to the door was littered with fallen branches. It was the kind of place most people avoided, but not someone who wanted to hide in plain sight. The door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, filtering through cracks in the boarded windows. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, but there was something else, something faint, metallic. Blood. Inside the house, the team advanced slowly, clearing rooms methodically. Empty furniture sat like abandoned ghosts, and walls were stained with age and neglect. Then Lena noticed it. A series of small marks along the floorboards, faint scuffs that led to a hidden staircase in the corner of the living room. She knelt to examine it. "These were recent," she whispered. "Not decades old." The staircase descended into darkness. Lena signaled for flashlights, moving first with her team close behind. The stairs led to a basement that had been sealed off for years. Dust covered the concrete floors, but recent footprints marred the surface, confirming someone had been here recently. At the center of the room was a large wooden chest, chained and padlocked. Lena removed the brass key from her pocket, the one left outside, and slid it into the lock. It clicked open smoothly, as if waiting for her. Inside were folders, photographs, and documents meticulously organized. Lena carefully flipped through a folder marked Hawthorne Files and froze. Photographs of the Wallace family, taken weeks before their disappearance. Surveillance-style images. Children leaving school, parents shopping, the family dog tied outside the house while they walked into a store. Whoever had been watching them had been planning this for a long time. The first lead. Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. This isn't just local surveillance. Look at these files, they go back decades. The Callaways, the Hendricks family, the Thompsons, even the Thompsons' files from the 1970s are here. Someone has been keeping records for decades, tracking families according to some pattern. Lena frowned. The spiral pattern. Sarah nodded. Exactly. But there's more. Each folder contains notes, coded references, and what appears to be financial records. Whoever did this isn't just a predator. They're organized, methodical, and likely extremely wealthy or resourceful. Lena scanned the room. Old furniture, dusty shelves, and dozens of boxes filled the basement. We need to catalog everything, she said. Every document, every photo, every scrap of evidence could tell us who's behind this. Sarah paused. Detective, look at this. She pointed to a small, locked cabinet in the corner. Unlike the chest, this cabinet had no keyhole, only a numeric keypad. Lena stepped closer. The panel had fingerprints, smudged numbers, and faint signs of wear. She reached into the Wallace files and found a sheet of paper partially hidden under a folder. Scribbled numbers were on it, dates, times, and what looked like sequences. 0412, 0730, 0921. I think this is the code, Lena said, entering the first sequence. The keypad beeped, but nothing happened. She tried the next two sequences in order, and on the third attempt, the lock clicked open. Inside were photographs of the unknown man whose face had been torn from the Wallace's portrait. The same man who appeared in every previous family's file. A name was scrawled beneath one photo in messy handwriting. Gideon Rook. Lena exhaled sharply. Finally a name. A dangerous connection. Researching Gideon Rook revealed little. No criminal records, no public business ventures. He seemed like a ghost, erased from the system, but the files in the house painted a different picture. Financial statements, property deeds, and shipping records suggested someone with immense resources. He had been buying abandoned properties across multiple towns, specifically in spiral patterns like Hawthorne Street. Every purchase corresponded to a family that had vanished over the last 50 years. Sarah's fingers flew over her laptop. Detective, look at this. Every property he owns is linked to a shell company. All are registered in offshore accounts. If he's behind this, he's untouchable through conventional means. Lena clenched her jaw. Then we do it the hard way. Track him. Follow his patterns. And find the Wallaces before it's too late. The first real break. Hours later, Lena and her team examined Gideon Rook's last known property acquisition. A small, isolated estate just outside town, surrounded by woods and miles from the nearest road. Satellite imagery revealed heavy activity. Vehicles entering late at night, faint lights visible through the tree-line. This is it, Lena whispered. This is where he operates. This is where the Wallaces could be. Miguel Alvarez raised a concern. It's heavily guarded, Detective. There could be traps, surveillance, even worse. We don't know what we're walking into. Lena nodded, her gaze fixed on the property. I know, but we finally have a lead. Gideon Rook exists. He's real, and he's going to pay for what he's done. As night fell again over the sleepy town, Lena reviewed the spiral map, now marked with locations from Gideon's properties, missing families, and cryptic letters. The pattern was clear. He moved in cycles, hunting in spirals, and Hawthorne Street was just the latest rotation. The hidden house had given them their first tangible lead. A man, a name, a location. But Lena knew the real challenge was just beginning. Gideon Rook was organized, careful, and centuries of secrecy had taught him one thing: never be caught. And Lena Price was about to become the first person in decades to try. Detective Lena Price stood on the ridge overlooking Gideon Rook's estate as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the forested landscape. The estate was vast, multiple structures connected by winding roads, surrounded by miles of dense woodland. Satellite images had shown unusual activity. Lights flickering at odd hours, vehicles arriving and leaving under the cover of darkness. But now, standing in the cold wind, Lena felt the true scale of what she was about to confront. "This isn't just a house," she muttered. "It's a fortress." Sarah Nguyen stepped beside her, scanning the layout on a tablet. And every property he owns fits the spiral pattern. Hawthorne Street was just one node in a chain of disappearances spanning decades. "Look here." Sarah swiped through a digital map, overlaying decades of missing families with property records and Rook's acquisitions. Red dots formed a near-perfect spiral across 3 states. Lena traced the spiral with her finger. "It's insane. He's been working for 50 years, selecting families based on what? Random chance?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "There's a logic to it. The spiral itself isn't just geographical, it's psychological. Notice the spacing? He escalates the threat over time, creating fear in the communities, breaking trust between neighbors. Each rotation of the spiral is more intense than the last." Lena exhaled. He's playing a long game, connecting the dots. Inside the task force's mobile command center, Lena and her team spread out every file recovered from the hidden house. Photographs, letters, bank statements, property deeds, all meticulously labeled. Officer Miguel Alvarez studied the data with a frown. Every previous family he targeted fits the same pattern. Isolated, upper middle class, with strong community ties. He picks families that others notice disappearing, but he erases the trail before anyone can intervene. Sarah added, "And it's not just disappearances. Look here, the Hendricks, the Thompsons, even the Callaways. Each family had someone who either questioned something unusual in the neighborhood or stumbled onto a secret Rook was hiding. That person disappears first." Lena's jaw tightened. "So the Wallaces weren't random, they uncovered something." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. And based on the spiral pattern, if we can predict his next node, we might be able to find them alive." Miguel's eyes widened. "Predict? You mean he's still active?" Lena turned sharply. "Active enough to kill again. And if we don't move fast, the Wallaces could be gone forever." The next node. Using the spiral map, Lena and her team traced the next likely target. It was a small town in northern Vermont, rural, isolated, with families living miles apart, much like Hawthorne Street. The spiral's progression was almost clockwork. Each node separated by roughly 20 to 30 miles, spiraling outward over time. "Look at this," Sarah said, highlighting the coordinates on the map. "The timing between nodes is shrinking. If Rook continues the pattern, he could strike within days." Lena clenched her fists. "Then we need to be ahead of him. If we can locate his safe houses, we can find the Wallaces and stop him before the next spiral rotation begins." A haunting discovery. Lena returned to the Wallace home once more, retracing the family's last known movements. In the basement, she found something she had missed before, a small, spiral-shaped engraving etched into the floorboards beneath the chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, worn smooth by decades of neglect. But it matched the spiral motif in every other location, the red dots, the letters, the key fob. "This isn't just symbolic," Lena said, kneeling beside the engraving. "It's a map, a code, a trail he leaves for someone, or maybe for himself, to track his own operations." Sarah leaned over her shoulder. The engraving aligns with the coordinates in the brass keys folder. Whoever Gideon Rook is, he documents everything. He's meticulous. Every victim, every property, every rotation of the spiral, logged and archived. Lena's stomach sank. So if we follow the spiral pattern backward, we can find all the previous nodes, and maybe see the trail he left. Uncovering the past. The team spent days tracing the spiral backward. Each location revealed more files, more photographs, more evidence of Rook's decades-long obsession. They discovered abandoned houses, empty warehouses, even cryptic messages left behind in newspapers and local notices. At a shuttered estate in New Hampshire, Lena found a journal, Rook's own handwriting scrawled across yellowed pages. The spiral teaches control. Families must learn to disappear willingly. Fear ensures compliance. Each rotation strengthens the system, preparing it for the next phase. Lena's hands trembled. He's been thinking about this for decades, planning it as if it were a game. Sarah added, a deadly game, and the Wallaces are just the latest players. The first lead on Rook. Among the recovered files was a photograph of Gideon Rook himself, a man in his late 70s, with sharp features and a calm, almost clinical expression. He was alone in the photograph, standing before a spiral diagram similar to the ones Lena had seen in the Wallace basement. Beside the photo was a note. The spiral is never broken, only delayed. Lena felt the weight of the words. Rook wasn't sloppy. He was deliberate, and he had survived detection for decades because he anticipated every move investigators might make. Miguel broke the silence. So we know the pattern. We know the targets. But where is he now? How do we find a man who's been invisible for 50 years? Lena stared at the map, tracing the spiral with her finger. We follow the pattern. We anticipate his next move. We think like him, and we do whatever it takes to reach the Wallaces before he completes another rotation. The hunt begins. As night fell, Lena assembled her strike team. Surveillance equipment, vehicles, and satellite imagery were prepped. Every coordinate along the spiral map was logged. The northern Vermont town, his next potential node, was under virtual lockdown. This is it, Lena said firmly. We're stepping into the spiral. We follow the nodes, we anticipate Rook, and we bring the Wallaces home. Sarah looked over the files once more. Detective, I've compiled everything. Every previous disappearance, every safe house, every document. It's all here. If we move fast, we have a real chance. Lena nodded, her gaze steely. Then let's move. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the chill of the unknown. The spiral was turning again, and this time, Lena Price was determined to stop it. Somewhere ahead, Gideon Rook was watching, waiting, and the spiral would soon force the next family into his deadly game. But Lena had a plan. She had the pattern, and she had the determination to follow it into the shadows, wherever it might lead. Detective Lena Price sat in the back of the unmarked SUV, her eyes scanning the darkened countryside ahead. The northern Vermont town stretched before her like a living puzzle, small streets weaving between isolated farms and woodlands, empty except for the occasional flicker of a light in a farmhouse window. Beside her, Sarah Nguyen reviewed the satellite feeds on her tablet. All nodes along the spiral have been flagged. Any unusual movement, we pick it up immediately. This town, it's the closest we've come to Rook's next node. Lena adjusted her seatbelt. We follow the pattern. Every previous disappearance, every safe house, they all lead to him. And if the Wallaces are still alive, this is where he's going to move them next. The SUV rolled silently down a gravel road toward the first coordinates marked on the digital spiral map. Lena's mind replayed the files recovered from the hidden house. Decades of disappearances, every family carefully chosen, every rotation of the spiral escalating in precision. Somewhere within the town, Gideon Rook had a hub, a place where the pattern converged. The heart of the spiral. First signs of life. As they approached the outskirts, night vision cameras revealed faint movement in a barn near the edge of the forest. Shadows flitted across the walls, and Lena noticed a small figure crouched near the entrance. "Stop here," she whispered, signaling the team. They disembarked silently, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. Through the thermal scope, Lena could see more figures, at least 5 adults and 2 children, moving carefully through the shadows. Their posture was tense, alert, as if expecting an intruder at any moment. Sarah's voice was barely audible over the comms. "Detective, the Wallaces. I think they're here." Thermal signatures matched the family from Hawthorne Street. Lena's stomach twisted. "Stay calm. We approach carefully. No sudden moves." The team split into 2 units, circling the barn silently. Lena led one unit toward the rear, where a back entrance was partially obscured by stacked hay bales. Miguel Alvarez covered the front with the other team. Inside the barn, the back door creaked softly as Lena pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of hay, dust, and faint traces of blood. Dim light from a single bulb revealed a chaotic scene. Children huddled on the floor, adults restrained with ropes, and the faint scratching sound of metal against wood coming from the corner. The Wallaces were alive, but terrified. Their eyes widened as Lena's team appeared, and the father, Thomas Wallace, struggled against his bonds. "Detective Price, he breathed, disbelief and relief flooding his voice. You found us. Lena quickly moved to cut the ropes, kneeling beside him. You're safe now, she said firmly. We've tracked him here. No one will hurt you again tonight. But even as she spoke, her instincts screamed danger. This was a trap. She could feel it in every shadow, every creaking beam. Gideon Rook wasn't sloppy. If the Wallaces were here, it meant he wanted them found, but on his terms. The hidden trap. As the team freed the family, a low hum filled the barn. Lena's radio crackled. Detective cameras picking up multiple heat signatures approaching from the north, Sarah warned. At least 8 adults. Could be Rook's enforcers. Lena swore under her breath. Everyone back to the SUVs. Move quietly but quickly. They herded the Wallaces toward the exit. Outside, the fog had thickened, obscuring movement in the surrounding fields. Lena counted heads, all present. But a sudden metallic clatter echoed from inside the barn. Hay bales shifted, revealing a small concealed door in the floor. Something had been hidden beneath the barn all along. Lena crouched, motioning for Miguel to cover her. Slowly, she lifted the hatch. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, damp and cold. Whatever's down there, she whispered. Rook's keeping it for a reason. The heart of the spiral. The staircase led to an underground chamber, walls lined with metal shelves, filing cabinets, and a small control station with monitors flickering with live feeds. Every monitor displayed locations from previous disappearances. The Wallaces, the Callaways, the Hendricks, the Thompsons, all tracked in real time. Lena's eyes widened. This is his hub. He's been monitoring everything. Every family, every move, all decades of his operation. Sarah approached the monitors, scanning rapidly. Detective, these aren't just old cases. He's still active in other towns. This hub, it's the central command. He's controlling the entire spiral from here. Lena felt a chill. We've found the heart of the spiral. But where is Rook? A soft click echoed behind them. Lena turned to see a figure in the doorway, calm and composed, Gideon Rook himself. He was older than she expected, sharp-eyed and unervingly serene. Detective Price, he said, his voice smooth and measured. I wondered when you'd arrive. Lena leveled her weapon. It's over, Rook. Your game ends tonight. Rook smiled faintly. Game? Oh no, this isn't a game. It's a pattern. A system. And systems evolve. Confrontation. Rook stepped closer, glancing at the monitors. You see, every family you've recovered, every lead you've followed, you're playing right into the spiral. You think you're hunting me. But in truth, I've been guiding you all along. Lena's heart pounded. Guiding us? Yes, he said, tilting his head. I left the key, the letters, the maps. Every step was part of the spiral. I create patterns, and you follow them. It's beautiful in its inevitability. Sarah whispered into Lena's ear. Detective, we need a plan. He's calm, but he's dangerous. He could trigger traps, call reinforcements. We don't know what else he is down here. Lena nodded. Miguel, secure the exits. Keep the family safe. Sarah, start downloading everything from the hub. We're taking his operation offline now. Rook's eyes flicked to the monitors. You think you can stop it? Systems like mine never die. The spiral always turns, and it always claims its victims. Lena took a deep breath. Not tonight. With precision born of years in the field, the team moved as one. Miguel and 2 officers blocked the entrance while Lena and Sarah approached the control station. Laptops and tablets were hooked to the monitors, capturing live data streams. Unraveling the spiral. Rook lunged suddenly, but Miguel tackled him to the ground. Lena seized the moment to access the main console. Streams of coded files, surveillance footage, and decades of Rook's operations appeared on screen. This is it, Lena said, determination blazing. Every disappearance, every safe house, every secret you've hidden, it ends now. Rook struggled beneath Miguel's grip. You can't stop it. The spiral is bigger than me. It's bigger than you. You're just part of the pattern now. Lena ignored him, fingers flying across the keyboard, downloading and encrypting every file. The hum of servers filled the chamber, as if the spiral itself were resisting exposure. Minutes stretched like hours. Then finally Lena hit the final command. The hub went dark. Monitors blinked out. The spiral, for decades unstoppable, was exposed and dismantled in an instant. Aftermath of the confrontation. Gideon Rook was restrained, escorted into the SUVs, and taken into custody. The Wallaces were free, shaken but alive. Lena and her team emerged from the barn into the foggy Vermont night. Outside, the northern stars shimmered above the town, serene and unknowing of the horrors that had taken place below. Sarah spoke quietly. "The spiral, it's broken?" Lena looked toward the forest. "For now. But systems like his, they don't disappear. They just wait." Miguel glanced at her. "Do you think there are more spirals? Other patterns out there?" Lena's jaw tightened. "If there are, we'll find them. And we'll stop them. That's what we do." As they drove the family to safety, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only one heart of many. But for the first time in decades, the spiral had been pierced, its secrets revealed, and one more family had been brought back from the shadows. And somewhere, Gideon Rook, unmasked and powerless, stared at the darkened night, already plotting the spiral's next iteration. Detective Lena Price didn't sleep that night. Even after Gideon Rook was secured and the Wallaces were safely relocated to a protected safe house, her mind raced. The spiral had been exposed, the hub destroyed, but Lena knew better than to assume the threat was over. Systems like Rook's didn't just vanish. By dawn, she was already back at the precinct, sifting through the files downloaded from the underground hub. The data was massive, encrypted spreadsheets, decades of surveillance footage, financial transactions, and detailed notes on every family Rook had ever targeted. Sarah and Gwyn worked alongside her, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Detective, look at this," she said, pulling up a new folder. "These files aren't just historical records. They contain instructions, contingency plans, traps. Rook's network has operatives in multiple towns, prepared to respond if anyone interferes." Lena frowned. "So even in custody, he can still orchestrate attacks?" Sarah nodded. "Exactly. He set up a failsafe. If any node in the spiral is disrupted, his enforcers react automatically." Lena's jaw tightened. "Then we need to move fast. If Rook's network knows we've taken the hub offline, they'll strike soon." The warning. Hours later, Lena received a call from Officer Miguel Alvarez. His voice was tense. "Detective, you need to see this. The surveillance cameras at the northern Vermont node, someone's moving in. Vehicles, people, all coordinated. It's Rook's enforcers. They're coming for the family." Lena grabbed her coat. "How long?" "Minutes," Miguel said. "Maybe less." By the time Lena arrived at the safe house, Sarah and the rest of the task force were already on site. They secured perimeters, barricaded entrances, and set up surveillance cameras around the property. The Wallaces huddled in the living room, terrified. Thomas Wallace looked up at Lena. "They're coming." "Yes," Lena said firmly. "But we're ready. You just stay inside and stay quiet." Even as she spoke, her mind raced through possibilities. Rook had predicted this. The safe house wasn't truly safe. It was a trap waiting to spring. The ambush. Outside, fog blanketed the property. Lena's night vision goggles scanned for movement. Shadows shifted across the tree-line. 8 figures moving silently, carrying backpacks and what appeared to be firearms. "They're here," Miguel whispered. "And they're organized." Lena signaled the team. "Hold positions. Wait for my mark." The figures reached the edge of the clearing, then split into 2 groups. One circling the perimeter, the other advancing directly toward the front entrance. It was a textbook ambush. Lena's heart pounded. "They're testing our response," she muttered. "Rook wants us distracted while he executes his plan." The first engagement. The first gunshot shattered the night. Lena dove for cover behind a concrete barrier as the team returned fire. Bullets ricocheted off walls and trees, the sound deafening in the foggy stillness. Sarah crouched beside Lena, monitoring the movements on the thermal cameras. "Detective, they're coordinated. This isn't random. Every step, every advance, it's rehearsed." Lena gritted her teeth. "Of course it is. Rook's network doesn't improvise. They follow the spiral, just like he taught them." Miguel radioed in. 2 enforcers down, 3 moving toward the side exit. Lena quickly formulated a plan. "Sarah, guide me." Miguel, flank the perimeter. We cut them off before they reached the family. The team moved like a single organism, anticipating the attackers' movements. Lena advanced cautiously, signaling for cover fire while her squad moved in to secure the perimeter. The trap tightens. As Lena and Miguel reached the side exit, they discovered the true danger. A secondary line of enforcers had planted explosives along the driveway, tripwires hidden under fallen leaves and branches. Lena froze, realizing the full scope of the trap. "They want us dead," she muttered. "Not just to take the family." Miguel nodded grimly. "We need to disable them carefully." With precision, Lena carefully dismantled the first tripwire, using training from her bomb disposal courses. Sarah directed her from the laptop, tracking heat signatures to locate other wires. The team worked in tense silence, knowing one mistake could trigger catastrophe. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last wire was neutralized. Lena exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from her brow. "Trap's neutralized," she whispered. "But this is just the beginning. Rook won't stop here." The aftermath of the first attack. By sunrise, the enforcers had been neutralized or captured, and the Wallaces were safe, again, but the cost was clear. Several squad members had minor injuries, and the psychological toll was heavy. Lena felt the weight of it in her bones. "This was just a taste," she said quietly to Miguel as they surveyed the property. "Rook is testing us, finding our weaknesses, learning how we operate." Sarah nodded. "And if he knows our methods, the next trap could be lethal." Lena's eyes narrowed. "Then we adapt. We anticipate. We become the ones setting the patterns, not following them." The Wallaces clung to each other in the living room, trembling but alive. Lena watched them, feeling a grim resolve. She had stopped the first wave, but the spiral was far from over. A message in the spiral. Hours later, Lena received a package at the precinct. Inside was a single photograph of the Wallaces' home, the safe house, and a handwritten note. "The spiral never stops. You can save them tonight, but the next rotation begins tomorrow." Lena stared at the note, recognizing Rook's signature style. The spiral wasn't just a pattern of locations. It was a psychological weapon, designed to keep everyone on edge, to instill fear, and to ensure obedience. "We're in the spiral now," she said quietly, "and we have to see it through to the end." Miguel placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've survived the first trap. We can survive the next." Lena nodded, but deep down, she knew the next trap would be deadlier. Rook's network was vast, cunning, and relentless. And somewhere out there, the spiral was turning again. Detective Lena Price couldn't sleep. The night after the first trap still burned in her mind. The explosions, the ambush, the terror in the Wallaces' eyes. Rook's network had tested them and survived, proving just how far-reaching and meticulous the spiral really was. By dawn, Lena was back at the precinct, surrounded by stacks of files and folders she had recovered from Rook's underground hub. Sarah and Gwyn sat beside her, already scanning decades of reports and surveillance data. "Detective," Sarah said quietly, "you need to see this." Lena leaned in as Sarah pulled up a folder labeled Historical Nodes, Spiral Analysis. Photographs, newspaper clippings, police reports, and missing person files were meticulously organized. Each file contained notes in Gideon Rook's handwriting, connecting vanished families over nearly 50 years. "Look at the dates," Sarah continued. "It all starts in the early 1970s. The Callaways, the Thompsons, the Hendricks, every family disappeared after someone questioned a local construction project or stumbled upon a property he owned. Each disappearance was followed by a note, a warning, or a coded message, just like the Wallaces." Lena's fingers traced the timeline. "So this spiral isn't new. It's decades in the making. And every family was a piece of the pattern." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. And some of the earlier disappearances weren't solved because there was no trail. The files in the hidden house, they're the first time we've had a complete record. The first connection." Lena pulled out an old newspaper clipping from 1974, yellowed and fragile. The headline read, "Family vanishes from quiet Vermont street, authorities baffled." She recognized the photo immediately, the Thompsons, and beside it, a small handwritten annotation, "Spiral rotation completed." "Spiral rotation?" Lena muttered. Sarah pointed to another set of notes in Rook's handwriting. "He didn't just disappear families randomly. Each disappearance corresponded to a rotation of the spiral, moving in geometric progression, connecting neighborhoods, towns, even counties. And he documented it meticulously." Miguel Alvarez, who had been standing silently behind them, shook his head. So he's been doing this for 50 years, and we just stumbled into it. Lena's jaw tightened. Not stumbled. We followed the spiral. That's what made us find him. But now we need to understand why he started it in the first place. The origins of Rook. Hours of research revealed a chilling backstory. Gideon Rook had been a wealthy real estate developer in the 1960s, operating quietly across multiple states. Financial records indicated he had acquired properties in precise geometric patterns long before the disappearances began. Police files suggested that his first documented victim was a local family who had questioned the zoning of one of his developments. That family had vanished without a trace. Other disappearances followed a pattern. Families who uncovered secrets about his properties, his finances, or his past. Lena studied a photograph of Rook from the 1970s. A young man with sharp features and cold eyes. Even then, he had the same meticulous air, the same calculated calm. Rook didn't just create a spiral pattern for fun, Lena said softly. He needed control. He wanted to orchestrate life and death on a geometric scale, as if he were a god of his little world. Sarah nodded. And every family that disappeared was part of his curriculum, proof that the system worked. Echoes in the present. The team began comparing Rook's past operations with present-day evidence. They discovered chilling similarities. Hidden messages in newspapers and mail, warning those who questioned the spiral. Small keys and ciphers left at properties, miniature breadcrumbs for anyone who might follow the pattern. Surveillance logs detailing every movement of families, even decades ago. It's like he's been rehearsing this forever, Miguel said, disbelief in his voice. Every rotation of the spiral teaches him more about fear, control, human behavior. Lena's eyes narrowed. And now he's testing us. The first trap wasn't just to hurt us. It was to learn us. Study our responses, see our weaknesses. Sarah shivered. He's adaptive. He evolves with each rotation. That's why he's lasted so long. A forgotten witness. During their investigation, Lena discovered a crucial lead. A retired police officer, Harold Green, who had been on the original Thompson's missing persons case in the 1970s. Lena arranged to meet him at his modest home on the outskirts of town. Green was in his late 70s, frail but sharp-eyed. Lena explained the current situation, showing him the files and photographs. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. I tried to tell the department back then, but they didn't listen. I thought I was losing my mind. The disappearances, they weren't random. There was a pattern, a spiral. I couldn't prove it. Lena listened carefully. What do you remember about the Thompsons' case? Green's eyes clouded. They vanished after their eldest son found something in the attic of their new house. Papers, ledgers, something the developer shouldn't have had. They confronted him, asked questions. Then gone. Like they never existed. And the spiral? Lena pressed. Green's hand trembled. It was everywhere. Maps, streets, property lines. He was calculating it, planning it. He made sure no one outside his circle ever noticed, until it was too late. The psychological spiral. Back at the precinct, Lena and Sarah reviewed Green's account alongside the historical files. A terrifying realization emerged. The spiral wasn't just geographic, it was psychological. It's fear, Lena said. The spiral is a system for controlling people. First, he isolates the family. Then he monitors them. Then, he removes them from the community. Each rotation of the spiral increases the fear in the surrounding neighborhood. People start watching each other, distrusting each other, and he gains control. Sarah added, it's genius in a horrifying way. He doesn't just hunt families. He manipulates entire communities. Lena's gaze hardened, which means we're dealing with more than just one man. His network, his operatives, they're trained in the same system, the same spiral logic. And every time we stop a node, he adapts, preparing for the next move. Knowing the spiral's history gave Lena an advantage, but also revealed the scale of the danger. Every previous rotation had been perfected over decades. Rook had learned from every failure, every delay, every law enforcement attempt. Detective, Sarah said, we can anticipate his moves if we continue to map the spiral, analyze the historical nodes, and predict his next target. But we have to be faster than him this time. Lena clenched her fists. We've already survived one trap. We've exposed his hub. Now we use his own spiral against him. We predict his pattern, we intercept him, and we bring all remaining nodes to light. Miguel looked uneasy. And the Wallaces? They're safe for now, Lena said. But every node we expose increases the risk. Rook's network will react. That's inevitable. A haunting revelation. As Lena pored over Rook's files late into the night, she found a folder labeled Legacy, Future Nodes. Inside were dates, locations, and instructions for operations planned decades in advance, nodes that had yet to occur. Lena felt a chill. Gideon Rook had been planning beyond his lifetime. The spiral was not just a pattern of disappearances. It was a blueprint for a system that could continue without him, a network ready to operate autonomously. This isn't over, Lena whispered. Not even close. The spiral extends beyond him, beyond us, and we're just beginning to confront it. Detective Lena Price had chased Gideon Rook through the shadows of decades, unraveling his spiral of disappearances, surviving his traps, and exposing the hub where he meticulously controlled every node. Yet, as she studied the historical files, she realized something was missing. Rook had not acted alone. The sophistication, the longevity, the psychological precision. It wasn't the work of one man, no matter how meticulous. Someone had taught him. Sarah Nguyen pointed to a set of folders pulled from Rook's hub. Detective, look at these documents. Some of them predate his first disappearances. They reference training techniques, psychological assessments, and even geometric theories about patterns in human behavior. They're signed by someone named Victor Laramie. Lena's eyes narrowed. Victor Laramie, does that name come up anywhere else? Sarah shook her head. Almost nowhere. A few references in academic papers about behavioral modeling and pattern recognition, but nothing linking him to crime. Until Rook. Miguel Alvarez, reviewing photographs of Rook from decades past, spoke up. So this Laramie guy, he trained Rook, taught him the spiral method. That's what it looks like, Lena said, staring at the files. Rook didn't invent this. He inherited it, and that means the spiral is bigger than we thought. It didn't start with him, it started with Laramie. Tracking the mentor. The hunt for Victor Laramie led Lena to an abandoned manor on the outskirts of Vermont. Satellite imagery revealed that, like Rook, Laramie had owned multiple properties in precise geometric alignments. The manor was overgrown with ivy, paint peeling, windows shattered. Yet the air of authority lingered. Someone had meticulously maintained control over the property, even from afar. Lena and Miguel approached cautiously, weapons ready. Inside, dust-coated furniture and dim light revealed rows of bookshelves filled with thick volumes on psychology, geometry, and human behavior. On a central table lay journals, meticulously written in spidery handwriting, Laramie's notes, charts, and diagrams. These are the foundation, Lena whispered. All of Rook's operations, all his patterns, they come from this man. Sarah scanned the journals, awe and horror mingling in her expression. Look at this, behavioral profiling, neighborhood control, spiral pattern theory. He created the blueprint for decades of disappearances before Rook even acted. The mentor's philosophy. Laramie's writings revealed a disturbing philosophy. He believed society was chaotic and flawed, and that control could only be achieved through calculated psychological manipulation. Families were pawns, neighborhoods were laboratories, and fear was the instrument of obedience. One passage stood out. Patterns govern human behavior. Isolate, observe, and manipulate. A spiral is not just geometry, it is control. Those who follow the spiral willingly reveal themselves. Those who resist must be removed. Lena's stomach turned. Rook didn't just kill, he applied Laramie's methodology. And now we see the system's origin. Sarah added, and that explains the adaptability. Rook didn't improvise. He evolved the system according to Laramie's principles. Every trap, every rotation of the spiral, it's methodical, almost academic. A hidden connection. Digging deeper, Lena found photographs of Rook and Laramie together, dating back to the early 1970s. A younger Rook, sharp and attentive, stood beside an older Laramie, who appeared to be instructing him using diagrams of spirals and grids. This is mentorship, Lena said, tracing a finger along the photograph. Rook learned everything from him. Laramie designed the spiral, and Rook executed it. Miguel frowned. Does that mean there are others? More students, more operatives trained in the spiral method. Lena's eyes darkened. If Laramie trained Rook, it's likely he trained others, or at least created a system that could be continued without him. Rook is just one link in a much larger chain. The mentor's legacy. Laramie's journals hinted at future nodes, long after his and Rook's lifetimes. Detailed maps, predicted rotations of the spiral, and contingency plans for families who might escape the system. He planned for decades, Sarah said, her voice trembling. This isn't just Rook, it's a legacy. The spiral will continue even if he's caught. Lena clenched her fists. Then we can't just focus on Rook. We have to dismantle the network completely. Find every node, every student, every operative who learned from Laramie's blueprint. Miguel glanced at her. It's bigger than we thought, much bigger. Yes, Lena said quietly. And the Wallaces were just the tip of the spiral. If we fail, more families will vanish, more communities will be manipulated. Laramie's philosophy is still alive, and it's deadly. A shocking discovery. As Lena combed through one of Laramie's final journals, she found a photograph hidden between pages. It showed a young child in a sunlit park, holding a notebook with sketches of spirals. A note on the back read, "The future keeper of the spiral, chosen to continue the pattern." Lena felt a chill. This is a prophecy of sorts. Laramie was grooming successors, teaching them the spiral method from childhood. Rook was his first. But there could be others who learned and evolved the system. Sarah swallowed hard. Detective, that means we haven't even scratched the surface. The spiral network could extend across the country, or the world. Lena stared at the photograph, determination blazing. Then we find them. Every successor, every operative, every node. We stop the spiral before it claims another family. The spiral expands. As they left the manor, Lena glanced back at the crumbling building. Laramie was gone, dead, she assumed, but his work lived on. The spiral was no longer just a local phenomenon. It was a network, a system, a philosophy embedded in human behavior. This is bigger than anything we've faced, Lena said. But we've survived Rook's traps. We've exposed the hub. Now we go after the source of the spiral's legacy. We end it, once and for all. Sarah nodded. The mentor has been revealed. Now we hunt the disciples. And somewhere in the shadows, trained in the ways of Laramie, new nodes of the spiral were already in motion, waiting for the next rotation. The storm had arrived. Cold rain pelted the small Vermont town, turning streets into reflective mirrors of flickering streetlights. Detective Lena Price stood in the command van, her eyes scanning live satellite feeds. Every node along the spiral had been mapped, every potential target marked. Yet despite all preparations, the weight of the task pressed down on her. This was the final countdown. The network is mobilizing, Sarah Nguyen said, her voice tense. Heat signatures across 3 towns match Rook's operatives. They're converging, moving quickly. If we don't intercept, another family could vanish tonight. Lena clenched her fists. Then we move fast. We've survived traps, uncovered hubs, exposed the mentor. Now we finish this. Miguel Alvarez checked the perimeter feeds. The Wallaces are secure, but their town's perimeter is too small to contain all operatives. We'll need to split our teams, simultaneously intercept multiple nodes. Lena nodded. Split carefully. Precision over speed. Any mistake, the spiral continues. Coordinating the strike. The task force divided into 3 tactical units, each moving toward a key node along the predicted spiral path. Lena led the central team, aiming directly at the location identified as Rook's operational stronghold, a secluded estate deep in the forest, rumored to house the final active operatives. As they approached, the storm worsened, lightning illuminating the dense trees. Lena's mind raced through every file, every historical pattern. The spiral's predictability was a gift, but Rook had already adapted once. Could he adapt again? Stay sharp, she warned. We know his tactics, but we don't know his contingencies. Sarah, monitoring remotely, updated the teams. Lena, all peripheral units report movement. The operatives are armed, organized, and defensive. Expect booby traps. Expect ambushes. But there's no hesitation. They're moving like Rook trained them. Lena swallowed. Then we move like we've trained. No surprises. Stick to the plan. First contact. They reached the edge of the estate as thunder cracked overhead. Shadows flitted across the broken windows. Lena signaled the team, advancing silently toward the main entrance. A guard spotted them. A shot rang out, echoing through the forest. Lena dove behind a fallen log, returning fire as her team maneuvered into position. Clear left, Miguel called. Entry point secured. Lena signaled the Wallace's evacuation unit to hold back. Her focus was on the interior. This was the heart of the remaining spiral network, the last active hub where Rook's influence was strongest. Inside, the operatives fought fiercely. Lena and her team advanced methodically, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats, and slowly pushing toward the main control room. The spiral's control room. The main room was a smaller version of Rook's underground hub. A wall of monitors displaying live feeds from dozens of properties, maps marked with spiraling nodes, and a central table littered with files and encrypted drives. Lena's breath caught. This is it. The last hub, the final rotation. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not Rook, but one of his most trusted operatives, trained in Laramie's philosophy. Calm, collected, and lethal. You shouldn't have come here, the operative said, voice smooth, almost rehearsed. The spiral controls everything. You can't stop it. Lena raised her weapon. We've stopped it before. We'll stop it again. You're done. The operative lunged. Lena and her team engaged in a brutal close-quarters fight. Takedowns, gunfire, and adrenaline blurred together. Slowly but surely, the operatives were neutralized, captured, or incapacitated. Rook's final move. Just as the room was secured, a familiar voice echoed from a monitor. Detective Price, you've done well, but you still don't understand. The spiral is bigger than any one of us. Bigger than your hub, bigger than your teams. It can't be stopped by force alone. It was Gideon Rook. Even in custody, he had anticipated every move, every strike. Lena felt a chill. Sarah quickly traced the feed. He's broadcasting from a secondary location. Remote activation, probably automated systems. The spiral, it's not just physical, it's digital now. Lena's eyes narrowed. Then we shut it down completely. Every node, every feed, every encrypted file. No backup, no failsafe. We end it tonight. Racing against time. Using Rook's files, the team traced every remaining node across the spiral network. From abandoned warehouses to suburban homes, from empty factories to rural estates, Lena coordinated simultaneous strikes. It was chaos controlled. Teams moving in perfect synchronization, neutralizing threats, rescuing potential victims, and dismantling the spiral's infrastructure. In one abandoned farmhouse, they discovered a hidden basement where Rook had been experimenting on subjects in secret. The walls were covered with spiral diagrams, notes, and surveillance records of families he had targeted decades ago. Lena's stomach turned. The scale of his obsession was staggering. The countdown ends. Hours passed like minutes. Every node secured, every operative captured. Finally, Lena stood before the central server, the last encrypted drive in her hands. This is it, she said, connecting it to the decryption system Sarah had set up. Files streamed across the screen, decades of disappearances, operational plans, future nodes, and contingency scripts, all now in their control. Almost there, Sarah muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. The final file decrypted, a map detailing every planned rotation of the spiral, including locations yet untouched. Lena's stomach dropped. It was proof of just how far Rook's network could have spread, and proof that tonight they had stopped it. With a final keystroke, Lena triggered a system-wide shutdown. Monitors went dark, encrypted files wiped, and the spiral's control completely dismantled. Silence filled the command center. Outside, the storm had begun to subside. The spiral, decades in the making, had finally been broken. The cost and reflection. Lena stepped outside into the wet night, staring at the horizon where lightning still flickered. The Wallaces were safe, the operatives neutralized, and Rook's hub destroyed, but the scars remained. Miguel joined her. We did it. The spiral is gone. Lena shook her head. For now. Rook's network is gone, but his philosophy, his methods, someone somewhere could rebuild it. Systems like this don't die. They evolve. Sarah placed a hand on Lena's shoulder. Then we stay vigilant. We learn from this. We make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Lena nodded, eyes steely. The spiral ends tonight. But the work doesn't stop. We've survived the countdown, but the shadows of the past will always be with us. And somewhere, in a high-security facility far from Vermont, Gideon Rook sat quietly, unrepentant, already plotting the next rotation in his spiral of control. Though now, for the first time, he was powerless to execute it. The rain had stopped. Dawn broke over northern Vermont, pale sunlight filtering through clouds, casting long shadows across the quiet town. The storm of the previous night was gone, but its echoes remained. The fear, the chaos, the harrowing reality of Gideon Rook's spiral network. Detective Lena Price stood outside the precinct, watching as teams coordinated the final steps of dismantling the network. It had been a week since the final countdown, a week of arrests, searches, and rescue operations. Detective, Sarah Nguyen approached, holding a stack of printed maps. We've confirmed all remaining nodes. No active hubs, no missing families unaccounted for. The spiral is dismantled. Lena exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing. For now, she murmured. The spiral's philosophy may survive, but its execution is over. Rook won't be able to rebuild it. The trials begin. Gideon Rook was transferred to a federal detention center under maximum security. His calm, composed demeanor had not wavered even as he was led into handcuffs. At the trial, prosecutors laid bare the full extent of his crimes. Decades of disappearances, psychological manipulation, and systematic terror. Families who had been silenced for years came forward to testify, recounting the nightmares they had endured. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from across the country documented the proceedings. The story of the spiral, once hidden in shadows and secret files, was now public knowledge. Lena watched from the back, feeling the weight of justice balancing against the suffering. She had seen firsthand the terror Rook had inflicted, the lives he had ruined. Yet now, for the first time, accountability was real. The victims reclaimed their lives. The Wallaces were safe. The family returned to a small, secure home under witness protection. Though trauma lingered, they began rebuilding their lives, slowly, carefully. Thomas Wallace met Lena one afternoon at a quiet park. His eyes were clear but haunted. "You saved us," he said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you, or how to make sense of it all." Lena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You survived. That's what matters. The spiral ends with us holding it accountable, unraveling the spiral's legacy." Even with Rook imprisoned, Lena and her team continued to analyze the files recovered from his hub. Every spreadsheet, every photograph, every journal was scrutinized to ensure no node remained hidden, no operative unaccounted for. Sarah discovered that several of Rook's strategies were still influencing communities. Laws, zoning, and manipulations he had embedded years prior. Together, they worked with authorities nationwide to neutralize any lingering effects, ensuring the spiral's legacy could not rise again. Miguel Alvarez remarked, "It's like we've closed the book, but we had to read every page first." Lena nodded. "Exactly. Knowledge is power. If we ignore the past, we risk repeating it. We've ended the spiral's reach, but we've learned how fragile human communities can be when fear is manipulated." Facing Rook one last time, Lena had one final meeting with Gideon Rook before he was sentenced. The interrogation room was cold, sterile, and silent. Rook looked at her, a faint smirk on his lips. "You've done well, Detective. The spiral is dismantled for now. But you can't erase the philosophy. Patterns endure. Systems endure. Fear endures." Lena's voice was steady, resolute. "You can't touch anyone else, Rook. Your network is destroyed. Your successors won't rise. Justice ends the spiral tonight, and we've made sure it can never be rebuilt." He leaned back, still calm, almost bored. "Perhaps. But remember, systems like mine adapt. And the human mind is predictable." "You're behind bars," Lena said firmly. "That's the difference. You're no longer free to manipulate anyone. You've lost control, and that's final." For the first time, Rook's smirk faltered. Lena left the room, the weight of years of investigation finally beginning to lift. Reflection and resolution. Weeks later, Lena returned to the Wallaces' neighborhood, now quiet and safe. Children played in the streets, neighbors waved, and life moved forward. The spiral had been dismantled, but the memories of terror remained. Lena knew the cost had been high. Lives had been disrupted, families traumatized, and communities shaken. But justice had prevailed. Standing under the soft afternoon sun, Lena reflected on the lessons of the spiral. The lengths humans could go to control others, the resilience of communities, and the vigilance required to ensure such darkness never returns. She looked down at her notebook, where she had been documenting every step of the investigation, every file, every pattern. The spiral had taught her that evil thrives in secrecy, but it falters when exposed. Decades of fear, manipulation, and control undone, Lena whispered. One by one, the spiral's nodes are destroyed. One by one, the victims reclaim their lives. That's justice, a new beginning. As Lena walked away from the neighborhood, a sense of quiet resolution settled over her. The spiral network was gone, Gideon Rook was imprisoned, and the Wallaces, along with countless other families, had been rescued. Yet the world remained vulnerable. Systems like the spiral could emerge anywhere, in any form. Lena knew vigilance would always be necessary. But for now, justice had been served. The darkness had been exposed, and the light of accountability shone brightly over Vermont. And somewhere behind bars, Rook contemplated his lost empire, powerless to continue his spiral. The network he had built, the lives he had controlled, the fear he had spread, all dismantled, all undone. The spiral had ended.